those visions dancing across the foot of my bed. Crumpled sheets, two tired bodies, sins I commit now in my head. I have cursed your name 1,000 times or more. Your photograph lies deep at the bottom of my drawer, but when I looked at it this morning, I had no angry words to say. No angry words to say. The coffee maker that you gave me finally broke down. It up and died this morning with a groaning sound. All these ghosts I have driven out, driven them from my house. It's a simple life I lead, still got a lot to learn about. Yeah, but I'm finally getting over. Yes, I'm finally getting over. Yeah, I'm finally getting over the sad part of yesterday. No angry words to say. I learned a little about forgiveness. I learned a little about sin. A little about the soul of a man living within this skin. I ain't afraid of new love that could be started, and I don't wear a face that says I'm weary, broken hearted. I don't need someone to smother with a love that you discarded. No, 'cause I'm finally getting over. Yes, I'm finally getting over. Yeah, I'm finally getting over the sad part of yesterday. I'm finally getting over. Yes, I'm finally getting over. Yeah, I'm finally getting over the sad part of yesterday. La da da, la 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 la, doo 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 doo, la da da da, la 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 la, doo 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 doo, la da da da, la 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 la, doo 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 doo, la da da da, da 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 la la, yeah.
Hey guys, I'm back with noted Legacy Depths sideboard expert Jonathan Sukenik, #1
Yeah.
ranked sideboard evaluation strategist on the
Yeah,
planet.
I think this is part like 2.5 or 3 or something out of our infinite, deck sideboarding thing. Tom, as always, I'm very honored that you choose to do this with me versus any of the other more active legacy players, but I'm really happy to be here and love being involved.
Well, yeah, I appreciate your thoughts and mind for the format, and I think you're
And
perfect.
jokes, of course.
And jokes and stories, and you're also great at asking questions. I think it's almost better to have someone that's not necessarily attached to or married to the deck at hand, because they're coming at it from just a different perspective. And I think, you, given Delver's natural position in the meta at all times of the best or second best deck in the format, you're coming at it from your experience is very, very useful. Just period, but on that in particular, especially since we have like 8 decks that are basically Delver variants or offshoots of Delver variants.
Yeah, and I have this week off of work, so I figured I'd carve out this nice little slot to chill with you, and let's get this done. I'm excited.
Nice. Mavward, no, we're not going to. We've got like 6 hours. We're like 6 hours of this in, so we're not going to restart it with the mind break traps that are in the current list.
Yeah, but one thing that might just happen later on is that maybe we can either put out some sort of content either in written form or somewhere that like kind of explains the role of the card, and like this sideboard guide minimally like what you're taking out can still be useful, and then you can adjust relative to the sideboard changes that you might make, or main deck changes for that matter.
Yeah, and I'll probably over a period of time just literally just make a second copy right below this, and then have the newer version. That's what I did with Bug Depths when I used to have one of these sheets a year or two ago for Bug, was when Elvish Reclaimer got printed and that became a 4 of in the list. That kind of changed things around quite a bit. So I just had the original stock list stayed exactly where it was, and right below it was like an additional sideboard guide. So whichever version you decided to play, it'll be there. So I'll probably do that with Traps. I don't think we're going to do like a full walkthrough update of it, but there'll be something there eventually. Luckily, Traps, Mindbreak Traps are kind of obvious where they should go in. There's not too many spots where I think it's a gray area.
Like one thing that might be more interesting is like, since you're cutting certain cards to play the Mindbreak Traps in the board, the cards that are currently in the board are a little bit more flexible perhaps than what cards you're leaving in those matchups are pretty interesting. And for that, I think these videos will still be a good reference.
It's true. Matt's the recap of part 1 is good cards in, bad cards out. So, and there's a document there, so you can see exactly which ones those are. And there's also the entire video on YouTube if you would actually like to watch, to find out the reasons behind the conclusions that we came to that may or may not be correct.
Yeah, I guess the TLDR from my side is typically I love trying to cut like the lands that might not matter as much in certain matchups, but then Tom spends a lot of time explaining to me why they should be kept in. But then I fight a lot over the Lotus Petal and Spirit Guides. So
yeah, that's just to go over that really quickly. That's just a colored count. So to be able to cast Hexmage on time on turn 1 or turn 2 with the combo, we need a minimum number of black sources. And the deck's also light on green sources as well. Like, it's really kind of serious for a deck that has 32 lands and or mana sources with the fast mana. It really is cutting corners on green and black sources. So there's only so deep you can go when it comes to cutting petals and reasonably expect to cast Hexmage early. So that's the primary reason why we can't cut as many petals as Jonathan would like.
Yep, but I make him tell me every time. It has to be justified on every matchup.
No, it's not never cut lands. We cut lands in literally every single matchup, I believe, except against actual lands. It's the only deck we don't cut lands against. But we'll get to that. That's actually the 4th one. But yeah, since we have a bunch of these and we've been much slower at getting through them than we thought we would be, let's just dive right in. Humans is a pretty straightforward matchup. I know we've gone over the deleted VODs. I think we made it from humans to ninjas, so maybe we'll go through these a little bit faster. Humans is similar to D&T in that they have a lot of, depending on whether or not they have Vial or not, they have more. If Vial's in play, they have more answers. They have a 3-drop that can come in and handle the token. Sometimes they always have Wasteland. They usually have a copy of Caracas. So generally, we just want a little bit of removal. Wow, I'm really blanking on the 2 casting cost flyer that shuts off your land's ability. Tomic, yeah. So they have a couple of copies, 1 or 2 copies of Tomic, usually somewhere in the 75. So between that and the Vials and the other decent creatures, some of which fly, the Freebooter flies. So just generally just bringing in some catch-all decays for removal or to remove a blocker for a Lodge, and the Safekeepers to help with their tricks to answer the token and or Caracas.
Yeah, and your Pithing Needles seem like kind of the all-star of the matchup, but also like a little stretch thin. Like I can imagine just like a turn 1 like Wasteland Vial, you're just like, all right, this is gonna be a tough one.
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. None of the other cards in the sideboard are really relevant to the matchup at all. You could make the argument that maybe you want Sylvan Library, but they can often start with 1-drop and a 2-drop into lieutenant pumping their creatures, they can put some pressure on in a hurry. So I don't think Sylvan Library is really a card you want in the matchup either.
Yeah,
So,
they definitely have a wide range of hands that they're allowed to keep. Like even just like a Mother of Runes freebooter hand is already like very annoying.
yeah, so they're in a super creature heavy list, so we don't really want the duress. They're a pretty easy cut. There's no real graveyard interaction, so the one utility land we're looking to cut, we definitely aren't cutting the Ghost Quarter or the Step or the Caracas. Those all have relevant abilities. Caracas for Tomic and Thalia and anything else along those lines. Bog doesn't really have text other than being a black source, so that gets the cut. And because we're cutting a black source there, instead of cutting petals, we go with Spirit, or a split, we go with Spirit Guides.
Yeah, and so the argument I've typically made in the past against the Thalia decks is like, just I understand the black source count and like you can run out your petals on turn one, but like there are times where you might like draw a petal and it costing one extra into Thalia is like kind of annoying. One thing I did neglect, and it's like different with humans versus Death and Taxes, is it is cool that like Elvish Spirit Guide is a source of mana that they can't freebooter, so that's like kind of nice too. Whereas like a petal that you were holding in your hand for whatever reason could be freebooted.
Yeah, they don't really have a particular number of ways to really get a petal off the table. So, and they have no real acceleration. So there's never really going to be a spot where, unless you just misidentify. I mean, we're talking post board anyway, so you can't even misidentify what they're on. Unless we like literally turn one or turn two kill them and misidentify the deck, but normally their lands are so distinct that it's almost impossible to not know what you're playing against. So we shouldn't really be losing a mana source to the freebooter.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with this as long as you have the plan of every time you draw a petal, you're pretty much playing it right away.
Matt's I think humans is just much more favorable overall than D&T. Like the density of the cards that they have that are
like no Flicker Wisp is kind of huge.
No Flicker Wisp. Even if you want to go with the more recent cards, the Skyclave is really annoying. And
I don't even know what that is. I haven't looked at any of the new cards.
It's basically a white 1/2/2 that when it comes into play, removes I want to say 3 casting costs or less. I'm not 100% sure about the wording, but it basically answers a permanent almost Oko style, and then if it leaves play, you end up getting it's 4. Okay, it's 4. You end up getting like a creature, like an elk. Almost. It's not an elk, but you end up getting a creature.
Oh, so it's kind of like Baffling End, if you're familiar with that.
Sort of, yeah. But anyway, it's just in this matchup, its relevance is going to be they have extra ways to hit needles. So, but yeah, Flicker Wisps. They have they have Revokers. They have extra copies of Caracas. They have 4 main deck Swords to Plowshares. After board, they normally have a couple of copies of Path to Exile too. So Death and Taxes just has a significantly, higher density of cards that are interacting with us. So I don't think it matters.
And where humans kind of gains this edge seems to be from the potential aggressive plan, like involving Thalia's Lieutenant, like we're talking about earlier.
Yeah, most of the games when I do lose, I think I've been fairly positive versus humans, but when I do lose, it usually involves like a quick creature into a freebooter taking a key piece or an answer, like say, Sylvan Scrying or a Crop Rotation I was going to use to answer something that they had, into a Lieutenant, and then you don't have enough time to recover or dig out of it, and those are usually the games you lose. But yeah, it's not nearly Death and Taxes level of a bad matchup. So
I think we're good to go to Infect.
Yep. So Infect is a weird matchup in that traditionally it didn't have white, but there's a couple of prominent players now that are, and there were some variants back in the day that would play a little bit of white and sideboard a couple of copies of Swords to Plowshares, but that seems to be more common. I think about half of the Infect players that I play now have like 2 copies of Swords to Plowshares in their sideboard. So it makes it a little harder. They've also been on the 1 or 2 of Crop Rotation package for a while, where there's a Wasteland hanging out somewhere in the 75, and usually
and sometimes the Caracas too.
Sometimes the 75. So they have a few more ways to interact than they used to. I still don't like overloading on like Safekeeper effects, because it really is just a couple of cards. And on top of that, yeah, the crop rotation still represents wasteland anyway. So if you can't force them to use the crop rotation, then they're going to be able to stop the combo one way or the other anyway. So, and they're so fast that we don't really have a lot of ways to interact with the Blighted Agent outside of the 2 decays anyway. So I don't really want to slow the deck down too much. Otherwise, we just risk losing to 2 or 3 swings. But even like a Noble Hierarch out, 2 or 3 swings, and any pump spell off the top just kills you with a Blighted Agent. So I think we kind of need to maintain all of the speed and just hope that the discard and a few protection pieces are good enough to get there. So that's kind of the setup here, where we bring in the decays to try to not lose to the unblockable creature. Sylvan Library is just flat out free in the matchup because they're almost never. I mean, they technically can try and kill you with like a huge Noble Hierarch that gets like invigorated and then berserked, but that's not really a thing that happens all that often. And we often have like a Hexmage or a Safekeeper or something, or a 2020 that can block anyway. So I think Sylvan Library is a great, and with them having the plows now on the sideboard too, that just makes it even better. So
yeah,
it's kind of
so like my major like considerations for cards that we would cut are definitely the Caracas that you have listed here, and then after that it's kind of interesting between like you have to leave in the steps now because of crop rotation to be able to protect your Merit Age from, be it like Swords of Plowshare, Submerge, whatever they're playing.
Yep.
I'm guessing you're choosing leaving the bog for your black source count, like just to be more consistent there.
Yeah, correct. I mean, the Caracas has no text in the matchup outside of it being an untapped land, and I just value the black source over the 1 land coming into play tapped.
And then Needle pretty much only names, well, I guess it could name whatever land they would crop rotate for, but the problem is like if they have rotation, you wouldn't know like by the time you need to play your Needle in a lot of spots.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, Needle's naming Inkmoth Nexus anyway.
Nexus, yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes that's their only creature. Sometimes they're going to try and buy themselves a turn to kill you with a block. That sort of stuff. It's not particularly great, but it does have its uses even if they don't happen to hit their one of lands or a crop rotation.
Yeah, I guess like the only consideration I have is like the 4th Needle or Not of This World over the Bajuka Bug, but I understand these numbers.
Yeah. Mats, I haven't seen Submerge out of Infect in quite a while, so I would assume that is kind of the case. They only have so many slots in their sideboard for removal style cards, and if they're going to be running plows, it's probably fighting over the same space.
Yeah, so we wouldn't like do anything different in the matchup, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, so next matchup is a fun one. This is probably post your Legacy time.
I was watching a lot of like Anurag streams during the time of this deck popping up a lot. Is it still as prominent these days?
It won 2 of the showcase events this year.
Wow.
So that was going back a few months, but you still run into it like not super regularly, but maybe like 4 or 5% of the time, something like that has been my experience. It's just a powerful deck. Like, people love Wheel of Fortuning, and a deck that can just do it on turn 1 and force mull your deck is, and especially sometimes when it can do it with Narset and Mind Twist the opponent, it's pretty obnoxious. And obviously Karn's a fairly obnoxious card too, and
it's still a Chalice deck, right?
Yeah, so it's basically Emery, which mills 4 and recurs artifacts every turn, and then the draw 7s with LEDs, and then the Karns, which can against our deck in particular, game 1, it can just grab Ensnaring Bridge out of the sideboard in game 1, and that's an auto win. Versus this 75 game 1.
Are they playing Force of Will in the sideboard? I remember that was true months ago.
Most of them have Force 4 in the sideboard. You'll occasionally run into a player that'll try and switch that up and move them to the main deck, but that's significantly less common. It's usually in the sideboard. And my experience has been that they don't board those in against us, which I think is correct. I don't think their blue count's not that high, and they can't really be exiling their bombs to counter like a Sylvan Scrying. Like they don't want.
It's also not great against a Thoughtseize deck. Like you can just take their action and then you're going to 2-for-1 them.
Yeah. So I don't generally see them bring that in. Sometimes you see some weird stuff. Like I've seen a Cyclonic Rift out of a player, out of the sideboard. Sometimes you see Submerge. Sometimes you'll see an Echoing Truth as like a catch-all. But their sideboard's not really particularly great against us.
Yeah, I always want to play Submerge in my Seat of the Synod deck.
Yeah, so it's funny. Goblin Lackey says the funny part is it's the Chalice deck that sucks versus Chalice. I'd say a good like 20 to 30% of my game 1 wins involve them playing a turn 1 Chalice and me like immediately playing like Pedal Swamp Hexmage and taking the counter off of the Chalice, and their deck ceases to function. Like their deck is literally Mox Opals, LADs, like 6 Baubles, like it runs the Seat of the Synod. Like it's just and Oof just shuts the thing down too. Like the deck has serious issues with its own Chalice.
Well, luckily you can still play Seat of the Synod into your Chalice. But...
Yeah, I was thinking of Oof post board. I was getting ahead of myself. So
it's all good.
So yeah, Hexmage is a beating against this deck. Needle is also a beating to preemptively name the Karns, that sort of stuff. But post board, you get the obvious artifact removal package of Vigors and Decays. They're almost certainly going to play something that's annoying, whether it's the Chalice or whether they wish for the bridge. Those are just good catch-alls that are going to come in. The Oof obviously shuts 60% of their deck down, so that comes in. The only one that's kind of like semi-eye-opening is the Leyline of the Void. But I think it's worth it against the Echo the Eons deck in that it either forces them to hard cast one, which is fairly difficult for that deck to get to 6 mana, even with the Soul Lands. And if they're tapping out to wheel, that's not the worst thing in the world anyway. But it also shuts their Emery off entirely, which is where they get a lot of the value out of their deck. It's just bringing back Baubles every turn as a draw engine, or recurring something you may have destroyed, that kind of thing, whether that's Chalice or whatever. I've been in situations where they've been able to sacrifice their own Chalice and bring it back with Emery and recast it even after the Hexmage has taken the counters off. So it's just nice to have their graveyard under control. It takes most of it just limits them to Urza and Karn as far as powerful lines. So what do they play in their board besides potentially Cyclonic Rift, like you mentioned earlier, that is annoying for us? Like I imagine there can't be that much for them to play Force not bringing in and have a Karn Wish sideboard that would like be relevant against us. So I think I can bring up a recent list.
While you're doing that, like looking at the cards that we're removing, it's listed here that's 3 Not of This World, 1 Needle, 2 Petal, and a Step. I understand like cutting petals because if you're playing against Hex Mages also to like remove the counters from Chalice, like that makes your petals a lot worse.
Yeah.
And then the Step, I don't know. I feel like having the hedge is kind of nice though against Cyclonic Rift or something weird they might be doing.
I think the reason it's not there is that they just generally don't. Like this is the most recent.
Sai looks like a pain.
Yeah, Sai is the reason that Inquisitions stay in against the Chalice deck, even on the draw, because we just can't really allow that to stay in play. We either need to...
It's pretty much like lights out against us if we can't kill it, right?
Luckily we do have Caracas that can bounce it and make their life a little bit annoying. That's another
reason. They can still like pair it though, which is like kind of annoying.
It's another reason why the ley lines are pretty good, because we don't want Emery bringing back zeros every turn to make additional flyers. We do have the Force of Vigors to move a couple of Thopters out of the way. The Decays can kill the Sai itself. And obviously we have a lot of discards, so we can even Caracas bounce it into discard if the discard comes late. And I've like attacked 6 or 7 times through tokens until eventually you find a way to get it off the table.
It's true. Without Karn and Urza like producing card advantage, it doesn't seem like they're actually good at winning.
Yeah, so post-board it looks like, at least this particular copy of it, they're going to leave the liquid metal coating in the board. They're going to leave the bridge in the board.
It looks like just no sideboarding.
I think they'll probably bring the Spyglass in.
Okay.
Guess possibly. I mean, maybe. No, I don't think they bring explosives in for Neil either. It's maybe a walking ballista or something if they think they can catch a stray Hex Mage or get a slow, but probably not. So yeah, I think it would be minimal sideboarding.
Okay, yeah. So with that in mind, I definitely agree with cutting the Not of This World and Step.
Yeah, the petals are just the reason we're going that direction over the Spirit Guides is Karn. They get an early Karn down. We want less of our mana sources locked off.
Yeah, I guess like the marginal value of having a Step in your deck for the times that they're playing something stray, like Cyclonic Rift versus like Ghost Quarter, which has the ability to make like second black, and like they don't play like Caracas or anything, right? So like more often than not, Ghost Quarter is just a land that can make another black source sometimes, right?
Yeah, you could definitely make that argument. I've just, considering that we're already cutting 2 steps, I like leaving in the land that can support the extra black. If I get got every once in a blue moon by a...
You mean petals, right? Cutting the 2 petals?
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, if I get got every once in a blue moon by a bounce spell, hopefully I won game 1, and that means we're going to game 3. Kind of thing. I could see if you want to just hedge that way, you certainly could.
If we could put like 1 step / like quarter, just that way people know that like it's really up to them, but like we're putting step first because we really think it should be step. Nice.
I'm just going to assume that if people are in this guide, they know what GQ means. Just to fit on the line.
I forget if I told you this. I have like really weird or funny like shorthands that I've developed over time for like when I write things down on like I'm a very meticulous note taker both in Magic and in the real world. So one that I like a lot that I think other people should do too is for infect damage, I write it like in between life total changes or next to it if it happens all in one combat. And then I use Roman numerals. So then you just like, I don't know. I guess it's hard if you don't know the Roman numerals for like 4 and 6, but I found that to be like very awesome in terms of helping keep track of life totals. Another one is instead of GQ, like I really don't like letter abbreviations for some reason, but I always just put like 25 cents, like 2.5 in the cent sign for Ghost Quarter every time I take notes. I don't know why. It's just what I do. So no one will be able to understand my notes.
Nice. Speaking of infect, since we're not going to go back to it, make sure everyone knows never to forget that if you block with your 2020 and they pump it a bunch of times to shrink your lodge,
you might need to make another one.
No. Not well. You can make another one, sure. But if they shrink your lodge, I have gotten there with 3/3 lodges before, but
oh my God.
But one of the things always to keep in mind is that those are tokens on the card. So
so you can Hex Mage
absolutely resets it to a 2020 at any time. So fun little
Love
interaction there. I'm not sure what you mean about the Ghost Quarter with oof mats. So if you can clarify that. Cop and Lackey apparently didn't know the Hex Mage infect interaction with the infect counters. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, Hex Mage does something in literally every match. Like there's always a stray planeswalker to kill, or a chalice to reset, or an ether vial to reset in response to them answering. Oh, that's another one for humans. Yeah, don't forget to use your Hex Mages to reset their vial counters to 0 in response to them activating it if you have a second one lying around.
Okay, so he's saying you can like go Quarter like an Ancient Tomb or something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's usually, sometimes that's just outright bad because a lot of times they have issues with their colors, like Urza's double blue, that kind of thing. But yeah, we can, stripping us of 1 mana to strip them of 1 mana. I haven't seen that. I haven't had that come up too often where I actively want to do that. But yes, if there's an oof in play.
We also don't have like the largest amount of oofs to be like trying this type of mana denial plan, but yeah, it could come up if the cards come up together.
Well, for 3 or 4 days after Bryant Cook won back-to-back legacy events with TES, I ran a version with 4 main deck oofs and 4 main deck traps as a joke, and tried to queue into them for a couple of nights.
Was that during the test challenge?
No, it was before that. It was maybe a few days before that. No, I didn't actively run that version against those poor souls. But yeah, so I did run oof in numbers for a while. It was not really that great, so I like it in small numbers. But I will, I guess if they are already tight on mana, that could be something worth considering in certain matches.
Yeah, or when you have like the intel of their hand, that can help a lot too.
Yeah. All right, so on to hands down one of the worst depths matchups.
Yeah, your favorite matchup.
My favorite matchup. I've played lands 5 of my last 10 matches, by the way, at Legacy. It's very, very fun. They have a new toy.
That's why you want to fire up the sideboarding guy. Just don't want to play another match and risk the coin flip of playing against lands.
Yeah, it's a little rough. No, I believe you reached out and said you were ready to do this.
It's true. Yeah. It is my fault. I just, heard someone banging their head against the wall that they keep on playing against lands, and then I heard it all the way over here and just decided to reach out.
Wow. Word travels fast in the Legacy community. All right, so lands is a really, really difficult matchup for depths. They're basically running the same win condition, except their entire deck is built to stop the same win condition, and ours is not.
Like, you have like slow depths, turbo depths. Like lands, I always think of as like actual like control, like
glacial depths.
Yeah,
glacial depths, because it used to have chasm. I don't think they really run chasm much anymore. So basically, if they have the loam engine going, we more or less never win. So the first thing we need to do in the matchup is make sure that they don't have the loam engine going, so that we're fighting card for card with them. So Surgical and Leyline are the starting points. They're not a deck that really pressures you. Some of the versions don't even have Punishing Fire anymore. A lot of them have transitioned to black for Abrupt Decay because they won't help dealing with Dreadhorde Arcanist and cards along those lines that are a real problem. So our life total is under more or less 0 pressure. So Sylvan Library is a great card for selection and draw. And of course they have a lot of ways. If we somehow get through their 4 Wasteland, Ghost Quarter, 4 Crop Rotation, thanks for the follow on Man Minimalist Step. If we somehow get through their 4 Wastelands, 4 Crop Rotations, Ghost Quarter, Gamble, fun stuff, they still have a ton of ways to deal with the 2020 itself with Maze of Ith and Caracas.
Their own 2020.
Their own 2020, all of which they can do at instant speed with Crop Rotation. CTH173, thanks for the follow. So the Safekeepers are essentially there for that.
Which like your Safekeepers are safer, I guess, like if they're not playing Punching Fire and they only have Decay. But I'm guessing they might leave in Decay because they might not have enough stuff.
They sometimes do. A lot of the depth shells run Reclaimer in numbers too. So, but in this match, even if they know you're on turbo, they're going to know that you're leaving in Needles. They're going to know that you have a Reclaimer. They know the sideboard plans, like the good lands
Thanks,
players.
Chad. Yeah, Blast Zone.
Yeah, we're getting to that, Mav. We're just going through the problems slowly. So they know you're bringing in Safekeepers too. So I think having surgicaled enough lands players, I can safely tell you that they usually leave some number of Abrupt Decay in. Has been my experience.
Yeah,
but yes, they also have the catch-all of Blast Zone, which unfortunately answers several of our key cards. So you have to be careful with your sequencing as far as running out Safekeepers early if you're also going to run a Needle out, because that's a really fast way to get blown right out of the matchup, is to have a single Blast Zone eat your Safekeeper and the Needle at the same time, or multiple Needles. So like having hands or plans that involve like turn 1 Needle on Wasteland, turn 2 Needle on Caracas to try and create a 2020 while they're tapped out, it's kind of sketchy if they have enough mana to zone and crop behind it. But we have the tools that we have, and it just is what it is if some hands play themselves out. But as far as Cut's discard is atrocious in the matchup, especially on the draw.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you don't hit them on the first turn, or like if they don't tap out to play, like if they don't go like diamond land into loam, or if they don't tap out and give you a clean shot, or we're not on a play and have a clean shot, you're basically never hitting their hand like after the second turn. Like you can hope to hit a crop rotation early, or decay early. You can hope to hit Sylvan Library. It's another card you really don't want them resolving. They usually have about 2 copies of Sylvan Library in the 75 now. They do have, you'll occasionally, I guess, get to hit the new card. Have you seen the second exploration that they're running?
Nope.
It's basically red into its landfall. Whenever the land hits the battlefield, they get to basically reveal the top card of their deck, and they can play that until the end of the turn.
Oh wow!
So it's a secondary exploration effect. That's
wait. So they can play a land off of that, even if they played a land already?
I think they have to have a land draw. Let me pull the card up. It's probably easier.
It's like a Valakut's thingy or something.
Yeah, I think it's called Valakut's Exploration.
Yeah, I should have done my homework before hopping on.
It's just play, so they have to have a land drop.
Okay, but I guess it's kind of like a tireless tracker that is harder to interact with, like another matchup.
Yeah, Matt's your loam deck is all the way over here with the 4. So you're next to last.
Oh, this is also like if there are any cards. Okay, so they can also like deal damage with this, I guess, but it's more just like draw extra cards. Okay.
Mats, if you have a time that you have to get out of here, we can do loam earlier if you need that to happen. So so it's basically sideboard plan is basically shave discard, because I don't think it's very good, especially the only thing it does after the early turns is force them to crop rotation, which can be useful, but it's not something we want to overload in. And go ahead.
My like I agree with this, and I think we talked I think we might have talked about parts of this already, but I think I like having Inquisition of Kozilek over Thoughtseize. I know your life total doesn't matter, but do they really play anything over 3?
Yes, they have Force of Vigors.
Oh, then never mind.
So yeah, they usually they know we have a couple of ley lines. They know we have needles.
Okay.
Depending on the version, they know we have Sylvan Library. So there are active targets, and they usually bring in Force of Vigor. So it's usually like only like 1 or 2 copies. So it's kind of corner case.
But your life total doesn't matter.
The life total doesn't matter, yeah. So, but
All
I
right,
guess if you obviously, situationally dependent. If you've hit them with a surgical in game 2, and you see that they don't have that card and they're 60 for whatever reason, obviously feel free to save the life and swap.
It's probably just not worth it though. Like, what if they bring in something for game 3 and whatnot? Like, I think the life total matters so infrequently that, yeah. I was just curious, but yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So continuing the difficult matchup section of the spreadsheet, we have Death and Taxes with more colors, better known as Maverick.
Pretty much similar sideboarding, right?
Yeah, almost identical. The major difference as far as cards that we have a really tough time beating is just Knight of the Reliquary is borderline impossible to beat if it's active.
Yeah.
So that's priority number 1.
And they can turn to it a lot more, right, with Noble Hierarch?
Yeah, they have Noble Hierarchs, and sometimes you often see, I've seen like a 1-of Birds of Paradise, and Green Sun Zenith for Dry Arbor is the other thing. So they can anywhere from
like 9 ways?
Anywhere from 6 to 9, depending on the version. Yeah, ways to accelerate, and then the 4 Knights, and then if you're not quick about it, then the Zeniths turn on, and they have 4 more copies of Knight on 4. So, yeah, you're generally going to see Knights, so you want to prioritize hands that are going to go after them fast with either discard or protection.
It looks like we have...
God.
Oh, sorry. It looks like we have 5 cards out on the play and 6 on the draw. I'm assuming that's like a copy and paste from our like Death and Taxes thing or something.
Possibly.
Let me scroll over.
No, you were definitely right. I don't know what happened there. The one thing that you can consider here is whether or not to cut, and maybe that's why the pedal was there. Whether or not you want to actually cut the bog, because a lot of these versions do have a 1-of Rumen Excavator, so they can get into spots where they can recur Wastelands, which is kind of devastating. So you may want the bog in certain spots. Or maybe you just arguably do. The reason I have it set up like this as the default is because I don't want to reduce the deck's explosive draws too much, for the reasons we discussed. Like, we're not going to be able to decay 2 verse 8 once you factor in the Zeniths on Knight of the Reliquary. That's just not going to work. The only other way we can fight it is we can try and discard it, but obviously that doesn't work for the ones off the top or if they have multiple copies. And we can try to needle it too. But the issue with that is they have numerous ways to get the needle off the table. And then on top of their standard answers, the Green Sun Zenith also can go get whatever their disenchant creature effective choice is in their 75. So needle's not exactly an effective answer, and neither is the discard. So you're just kind of like trying to hold it together for a short window, and you want to be able to kill them as soon as possible. So I really don't want to cut the pedal, and I feel like if we're in a spot where they're Green Sun Zenithing for a 3 anyway, they're not getting Rumen Excavator. They're just straight up getting Knight of the Reliquary anyway, 9 times out of 10.
Yeah,
So,
like they might get the Excavator if they like still have land drop and saw you miss a land drop or something.
And have the Wasteland, but if that's the case, we're probably already losing anyway. So I feel like the times where they tutor for that card, we were just gonna straight up lose anyway. So I'm kind of okay to losing to a naturally drawn Excavator plus Wasteland draw that we can't get under.
Yeah, I do feel like time is definitely of the essence in this matchup, and I agree with cutting the bog here.
Yeah, that's exactly, Matt. So that's another thing. If they already had a Caracas, we're never killing the Caracas until we're trying to kill them. So I'm not like preemptively ghost quartering their Caracas. So it's not just going to be, and we're not running like Encroach or some card that can put Caracas into their graveyard from their hand or something. So it's never going to be there until we're going for it. So I don't think that's really going to come up all that often unless maybe they can engineer some situation where we go for it, hit their Caracas, make the 20/20, and they flash in like a Scrib Ranger and block for a turn, and then they can Excavator back, but that's like a 1-of plus a 1-of plus a 1-of on their side, so I'm not even gonna...
You just don't need to deal with that.
Yeah, so I think that's just where I'm at the moment. So...
I like this.
Okay, so that brings us to Old School Legacy. That's more your speed.
Yeah, definitely.
So... Miracles is just so. It's a fun matchup, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of interaction in play too.
A little bit on both sides. Depends on the version they're on. Obviously, the green versions can become a little bit more difficult if they're boarding in things like Veil. You haven't really lived until they swords. You're not of this world, the swords, and then they make their swords uncounterable from a colorless card from a color hoser and Veil. That's an experience.
Classic.
But kind of stuff comes up. It's kind of painful when Teferi shuts off some of your instant speed interaction and you go to decay it and that gets veiled. So these sort of things happen. So the green version's a little bit more annoying to play against, which is usually the more popular version. But there's still a lot of interaction, and I really enjoy the games that don't involve Veil of Summer a lot because they have their plows and their quaddles and and treat and instant speed terminuses that they can try and set up. And there's a lot of gamesmanship on their cantrips and how they're ordering their library and whether you believe what's going on or not.
So, and I think you told me that like the sideboarding for this is similar to like the Shark Steel deck that it was popular for a span of time.
Yeah, pretty close to identical. They're not really pressuring your life total. So again, we want the library and they're a plow deck. So if they give us 20 life, 4 or 5 cards is nice. They have a lot of ways, depending on the variation, they're always going to have some ways to recur the spells in their graveyard. If that's not Snapcaster Mage, it's definitely going to be Mystic Sanctuary. There's going to be some way that they're going to try and recur the plows, so we kind of want to cut them off that. If they're leaning more towards like the snow variants with Euro, so surgicals are good for working on the plow recursion, working on any Euro nonsense, maybe stripping out the quaddles from their deck. Variety of reasons, shuffling their deck if we think they have, if they tried to brainstorm to protect cards from discard, or if we think they set up a terminus on top. So surgical is just all around good. Decay for their quaddles, for their Teferis, other random hate cards. I don't think it's very good, but I often see people bring in back to basics, which can sometimes be like a moderate annoyance. Sometimes you want to hit that. And then safekeepers are for their answers, the plows and whatnot. And Veil's just a nice little catch-all to help work through some of their counters at times.
It also seems like you have enough cards that you're willing to cut that allows you to bring in the Veil.
Yeah, the matchup is not about speed at all. One of the easiest ways to lose is to just try and jam. Like they have enough cards that can interact with you, whether that's instant speed quad block into Planeswalker bounce with Teferi or Jace.
Or Oko.
Or yeah. Oko, yeah. So that's not really where we want to be. And then they have obviously like at least four plows. You never know whether you're going to see some, with more of the Colossus like type permanents floating around. You sometimes see Celestial Purge popping up in a bunch of different lists, whether it's Miracles or Snowco. So yeah, that's not really, jamming early is just kind of a losing proposition. So generally we're slowing down. We're bringing in a lot more ways to fight what they have going on, and we're just trying to set up a spot where we present the combo relatively early, turn 2, turn 3, and just try and prevent them from tapping out for their bombs. So like, you know, on their turn 3 they can't just tap out for Oko, on their turn 4 they can't just tap out for Jace or whatever, and if they tap down to 1, that's when our interaction kicks in. And then on our turn 4 and 5 we either play like a Safekeeper or some piece of protection and go for it with protection. Is kind of the general plan. So we don't really need all of the acceleration. The Caracas doesn't really have. These aren't the good old days where they would try and flash in a click to block. So the Caracas isn't really great. I mean, there are some versions that have Euro, but bouncing Euro and letting them replay it and then replay it from their graveyard isn't exactly
not ideal.
We don't want them going to 26 and drawing 2 more cards kind of thing. It's not great. So I don't think that's particularly good. Depending on how many walkers you see, you could argue keeping in some number of needles, but they generally don't have that many where I find them to be all that useful.
Yeah, and like part of the problem of needles, like if your first one doesn't name Oko, then like it can also just get Oko'd. And then if your first one doesn't name Teferi, then like, or yeah, then they could just Teferi bounce and maybe do something else. Like,
yeah, they generally bring in some sort of like disenchant effect too,
like Return to Nature or something.
Yeah, and this setup actually just straight blanks the card, so nice. I kind of like that.
Except for your one petal.
The one petal and the one Sylvan Library, I guess.
It's all good.
I'm not running a Sylvan Library, so it's semi.
Yeah, and like it's kind of nice for you that like if they do choose to bring in those types of cards and they're able to like Thoughtseize affect their other cards, then like they just have less going on by the way you chose to preemptively like handle it.
Yeah. Where's Wolf? The Snow matchup is very similar to Miracles. It's almost kind of like a dance. Like, in fact, we might as well just do them both at once. Since I'm looking at it now, they're on the same page, and it's very, very close.
The difference is that extra surgical.
Yeah. So Snoko doesn't have like you rarely see like a Snapcaster effect or a Mystic Sanctuary effect. So they are a little bit more reliant. They are using Euro, so you could justify it, but the remove their plow plan is not quite as necessary. You're not going to get counterbalanced out of Snoko, so your discard spells are live longer than they may or may not be against certain miracles, old school miracles setups. But yeah, that's basically the only difference in these setups is one surgical. So it's a lot of the same problems is the plows, the quaddles into planeswalkers. The one thing they can do that miracles can't do regularly is gain more life. Like the additional copies of Euro kind of means that the plan I was talking about and not allowing them to tap out on turn 3 or turn 4 for something big doesn't apply to Snoko because Euro just allows them to just, freely tap out going to 21, 22, depending on how many fetch lands they've cracked. And not care if you make it 2020 because they can survive it. And then if they have the answer, they have the answer. You can get into spots where if they have to use... or if you have to use if they have to use multiple fetches they can't force, you can try and box them into that. So if like you can hit them once and they're at 1, you might be able to have crop protection for the follow-up Oko or the follow-up Swords or whatever the answer is that they planned on removing your 2022 and they may not be able to force back. So there's situations like that can come up, but they're just a hair better setup than Miracles is, in my opinion.
It looks like in the Snowco that on the draw we're taking out 7 cards instead of the 8. Is there a card that you're choosing to leave in?
It's a really good question.
Or not bring in?
This is one of the ones that was added afterwards that we never got to. So I just I believe, just threw cards in here almost.
We'll get to it later. Yeah. That's fine. Oh. Or now. Now it's fine.
We'll just do it now.
All right, cool.
We'll just say it was that. Actually, you know what? I actually do think this is probably better. I think I do want the second needle over the second extraction here, just because Oko is such more of a consistent part of their plan.
You're like off by a card then, right? Like you're bringing in 8 and taking out 7?
Oh, so I did that backwards. I see what you're saying.
Oh.
I thought there was an extra. Oh, that's going the wrong way. Look, I just want all the cards, regardless of whether there's space.
Yeah, no one will expect it if in the guide we have them play 61 cards.
We can board up to 62, right? No, that's not the thing. All right, so... speaking of more unfun matchups, Moon Stompy is one of the least engaging matchups in Legacy for Depths. It's significantly better than it was. It's arguably like a coin flip or maybe even favored for us now. Before it was just pure misery, but since they changed the Blood Moon ruling, we get
so now you can like play your Dark Depths, blow up their moon, and then kill them.
Yes, so basically the only draws that are really difficult to deal with are turn 1 Magus of the Moon. Anything else from them dies on the spot to Force of Vigor. Mm-hmm. So, and if we're on the play, we generally have the ability to fetch a basic on 1, and then we have 8 other versions between Petals and Spirit Guides to turn on Decay too, so even a Magus isn't particularly great if we're on the play. So basically any hand that opens with Force of Vigor or Decay, if we have a turn, we're more or less going to be able to beat all their moons, and most of their other cards don't do anything. Like, we don't care about their 3 casting cost goblins. We'll be able to erase that stuff easily. Our deck has enough mana sources and lands that Trinisphere is not really a problem.
Does Needle only name Karn?
Pretty much, yeah. They do have Chandras sometimes, depending on the setup.
But doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's more or less the bigger threat is Karn. So yeah, so once you get past the moon portion of turn 0/1/2, then yeah, the only thing you're really worried about is Karn and a bridge. But Force of Vigor and Decay kind of like also handle that. So basically, if you can like semi-aggressively mulligan to either one of those 4 cards on the draw, or just discard into a quick combo, or one of those cards on the play, then you're kind of fine. So
do they play any cards like Dead Gone that you might want to have one step over the bog?
You occasionally see something like that, but it's really rare, and it's usually really transparent too. So they have no way to really interact with us. So we're going to have a combo early, like turn 2, turn 3. Like we're just going to have it together. And if their turn 2 involves passing with like mountain, ancient tomb, like, and they have 4 or 5 cards in their hand, it's like, all right, I'll just wait for a discard spell, or I'll just wait for some piece of protection. I mean, you could leave the step in over the bog. The bog doesn't really particularly have text either. That's kind of...
Well, it's just black source.
Exactly, but since we're not boarding out any of the acceleration, it's probably fine. Yeah, I just can't remember ever getting hit with that. I see Dead going out of like some of the Turbo Muxus Goblins lists more often than I do out of Moon Stompy.
Okay.
So yeah, there's not a lot to that particular matchup. You could even argue like cutting a second needle and keeping the step if you're worried about it.
Ooh, I think I might like that.
Yeah,
because like there's not many ways that they can just like play Karn and do something in the same turn, right?
It's pretty hard, yeah. So you can normally either have a threatened combo that early or have a discard spell behind the Karn. So
yeah, I think I might like that.
Yeah, needles aren't particularly great.
Plus, like you've expressed this to me in the past that like just having the extra land can be useful with like crop rotation. Like you'll find a use for it. The extra needle, you won't really find a use for.
So,
nice.
So yeah, maybe my comments before that matchup were just a little bit tainted from the years I played against the that version pre-rules change where they just jam a moon on one and you basically lose more often than not.
Having Force of Vigor is definitely nice too.
Yeah, card is slightly overpowered for its effect, but I guess we're allowed to get some of those since most other decks have gotten a higher share than depth.
I'm more just sad that the non like blue and green forces just aren't as impactful.
Wait, what?
What?
What did you just say?
That the non-blue.
Oh, the non-blue. Forces. For a second, I thought you said the blue force was not impactful. I was like, wait, no, I couldn't even tell you what the other forces are.
One of them you get 2/3/1s with haste that you exile at the beginning of your upkeep. The black one, you kill everything that's coming to play, maybe just under your opponent's control or just in play in general. And the white one is the Anthem one that was played in the Legacy Double Dash.
Okay. Alex says that the black one has been randomly good in screenshots that he's...
Yeah, maybe just against him making goblins. It was really good for me unlimited. I got to trade my black card with and the Force against a Crashing Footfalls that came off of Suspend and them playing a creature. You don't even know half those cards.
No. Crashing Footfalls.
It's like Suspend, make 2/4/4s.
Yeah, that one I know. That actually saw Legacy play.
With like Electro Dominance and As Foretold or something?
No, the Footfalls deck that I remember was kind of like a Cascade deck that Arcanist.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. All right, so speaking of annoying interactions, colorless blockers versus Sajiri Step.
Yeah, they have the Thopter Maker, right?
They have Retrofitter, Foundry, and Ornithopter. So
wow.
They have 7 to 8.
Legacy All-Star.
Yeah, Legacy All-Star. So just bringing in all the artifact removal, and Bog doesn't really hit anything in the matchup, shaving a little bit of acceleration and one not of this world.
How hard is it for Foundry to make a Thopter? Like, is it 3 in tap?
No, it's like it's parceled down, so it's like 1 into... I'll just bring the card up before I read it wrong.
So you need to like make the servo to then make the Thopter to then make the other thing?
The 3 is to untap it.
Okay.
So basically you need 5, I believe, or 6 in the same turn to be able to make 1, untap it, and make the other.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we're like allowed to bring in Collector Oof to like, I don't know.
Interesting. I mean,
do something.
For whatever reason, and I don't know whether it's their sideboard setup, is I've run into removal a lot versus them post board.
Like what?
They've leaved Fatal Push and cards along those lines. Don't ask me why, if it's just a sideboard setup, like they don't have the cards to come
maybe
in.
they're worried about like Confidant or multiple Reclaimers or something like that. I can't fault it.
Whatever the case is, or they just don't have cards they feel are better in the slots, so they're hedging. Whatever the case is, I've seen a decent amount of removal post board from them. Plus they have Okos and Brazen Borrower sometimes, so I don't think Oof is great to bring in against their 1 card, especially if we're already bringing in 4 cards to deal with it, and we already have 4 needles. So, which are almost exclusively, yeah, they're almost exclusively naming the retrofitter. Because not all of the versions are even bug, so Oko is like either 0 or a 2 of. So yeah, the needle is almost 100%. The first one is almost 100% coming down on the Foundry. So
it's also not like the easiest for them to like elk it while you might be able to represent the combo.
Tower Tonic Booth with the Tower of the Magistrate reference. Pushes through Batterskull too. If somebody puts that on a flyer, well, no, a colorless flyer. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be. I'm going to be very sad if it ever comes to the point where I feel justified in putting Tower of the Magistrate in my 75.
I haven't heard that card since like Batterskull came out, so then you can just like use it against equipment instead of putting it on your own. like if they play Batterskull and have a germ, you can Tower the Magistrate the germ, so then the Batterskull falls off.
Nice. Yeah, I guess that has corner case scenarios in certain matchups. Preventing them from gaining a life would be probably not what I'd be looking to tutor for, but
yeah,
good if you know.
But like yeah, you could stop a Jitte the similar way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know.
But yeah, I don't feel strongly about how to like sideboard in this matchup. I could see like with you like cutting Bog that you can like play the second pedal, or you can play the pedal and cut 2 Spirit Guides. Like I know you like the surprise Spirit Guide though.
I do like the surprise Spirit Guide, but that is actually probably better. Like, we're not really hard casting Spirit Guides in games that we're winning.
I'm telling you, that's just my job in the sideboard guide, just the pedal versus Spirit Guide. You know, you're getting there.
Yeah, it's a slow process.
Wow. I feel like that took a lot of clicks. We don't even have the outs anymore. There we go.
It's all better now.
Now no one will ever know until they look at the revision history or watch the video.
Revision history. I feel sad if someone actually goes into the revision.
What does Not of This World stop in that matchup?
In ninjas, they usually post board to have some number of bounce spells. Usually, my experience has been 1 to 2 Brazen Borrowers, and if not 1 to 2 Brazen Borrowers, some other bounce spell, and sometimes 2 Okos. So that's generally what it's going at.
Which explains why we're willing to shave 1.
Yeah, I don't think it's great, but yeah, they have enough counterspells. It's a Force of Will Days deck that you can't always get through to their hand with discard spells, so having a backup protection piece is nice, and I don't like the Safekeepers over them in this matchup because, like we mentioned before, they do leave in some amount of removal, and or Oko to just start going after our lands if we try to protect a Safekeeper. So I think the 2 Not of This Worlds are not great, but passable.
Alright, on to Omnitail.
A fun deck where they just try to take multiple turns and annihilate you for all of your permanents. It's fun, clean magic. It's good times. The difference between this and Sneak and there's something like Sneak and Show. I guess we should just do them at once since they're kind of together here by a few slots. So the difference between the two of them is basically Sneak Attack and the 1. So, and Omnitel has at most a 1 of Gristlebrand, whereas Sneak and Show has numerous copies of Gristlebrand. So Pithing Needle is great in one matchup and utter garbage in the other matchup. So that's kind of the main difference. In outs, Not of This World against Omnitel, they normally have a Cunning Wish package with a bounce spell. So,
like Rushing a River.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's more than one. Sometimes they have like an Echoing Truth that they'll bring in, and then some secondary bounce spell. I've seen Rushing a River. The one that's really bad is the split second one, but luckily you don't run into that too often. Yeah. So it doesn't help there, but sometimes you see a Chain of Vapor. You see a variety of different bounce spells, but you know they're going to have some amount of Cunning Wishes and a bounce spell or two hanging out somewhere main and or board.
Have you gotten Snapbacked yet?
I have not. I think that's more like a High Tide card.
Yeah.
Not out of Omnitel. And their graveyard doesn't really particularly matter in either, so the bogs get cut in both. So basically, we're bringing in the Extraction in both. The Extraction's not really great against Sneak and Show. It's basically to bust up their Protective Brainstorms and narrow their combo pieces in half. So like if you can take the Show and Tell and needle the Sneak Attack, you're kind of doing okay. Whereas against Omnitel, if you can Surgical the Show and Tell, they might be down to maybe 0 to 1 copies of Eureka and hard casting Omniscience. So some of the versions might have like a couple of Quaddles and a Euro floating around, but that's the kind of stuff we'll beat over the course of a long game. So Surgicals are kind of devastating in that particular matchup.
What's the force for against Omnitel, or is that you have so many cards to bring out that you're willing to bring in like a force for the times that they like are able to resolve one of their things to put in Omniscience, and then you can break it up.
Exactly. Yeah. Occasionally you'll see something weird like a Sorceress Spyglass. I've seen that, but it's mainly just for the stray times where you can catch a Omniscience in the Cunning Wish line. But it's not particularly great, and so I'm not bringing in the second one. But I think it's better than Not of This Worlds aren't great. It's kind of corner case versus the Wishes. The needles are.
And you still have Staffs.
Terrible. Yeah. So it's just, it's kind of just, it's the best of what else is hanging out in the sideboard, I guess. Yeah, Faulted Form. I've had that come up with step 2. Yeah, lands that, with a random creature in play, lands that can stall out will prevent them from even casting the Emrakul, but that's a little more corner case. We have to have one of our 2 come into play tapped lands with a triggered ability, and the step in particular has to even have a creature.
And we're boarding out Bog in this matchup.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily. I mean, I guess you could argue cutting a second Not of This World and keeping the extra land. Maybe that's fair. But that's kind of a corner case scenario to have like a 1 or 2 of Force of Vigor plus the Bog in that spot.
I guess it really just comes down to how worried you are about bounce spells.
Yeah, I mean, it's marginal. I mean, they're probably going to have... Let's see what the recent version of it had.
I also wonder at some point if it's not better to just play like Veil of Summers over the Not of This World if you're allowed to take your time a little. But if the mana matters a lot, then Not of This World is definitely better.
The Veils are coming in.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I didn't line them up correctly on mine. Sorry.
Okay. So it's usually 3 copies of the Wish plus the Echoing Truth.
Okay.
So it's a 3 of for their deck, and this version has a main deck Caracas too. So if that's the case,
Okay, no, I'm fine with this.
Yeah, if that's the case, that's 4 live versions. There's also a Bant version floating around. So if you're
It,
against the Bant Omnitel version that's running Swords to Plowshares in the sideboard, then you can definitely reevaluate this. If that's the case, I wouldn't even touch Force of Vigor.
exactly.
I would start.
Yeah.
I would start looking at the Safekeepers too.
Yeah, that's pretty much the direction I was going in. That like
So it
I'm
really
actually starting to
depends.
be convinced that like you might want to just keep in the Not of This World over the Force of Vigor. Like the times Force matters is like the times where Omniscience resolves. They don't have exactly Force of Will in their hand, and they don't have like instants to like go off with their like instant like Hunting Wish,
Yeah,
5 man's
behind the
Foresight.
wish.
Like
Yeah, yeah, I think
so,
that's fine. I think
yeah,
I like.
it just too cute for me.
So this actually like covers the. I gotta learn to start using a cut instead of a copy.
It's Control X.
Is it X? I'm just so used to C.
It's right next to it.
It's miles away, man. Miles.
Jeez, do you use a Dvorak keyboard?
I can only go to the right. Left is out of my league.
Do you want to finish up with Sneak and Show though?
So Sneak Attack is a little different. The Force of Vigors are obviously much better against the Sneak Attack deck. A thing that they do regularly against me is they'll run out the Sneak with no additional mana just to play through discard. So you'll often get windows where you can just straight up hit it. And the Sneak and Show also usually has like 2 copies of some sideboard hate card.
Like Blood
moves,
Moon?
It moves around. Sometimes it's Blood Moon, sometimes it's Sorcerer's Spyglass. But they normally have some kind of hate-based permanent hanging out in the sideboard too. So, and usually it's the kind of card that Force of Vigor will hit. So, between the sneak attacks and those kind of cards, I think it has much more value.
Are we allowed to cut like Ghost Quarter for the second Veil of Summer? Or does it just not matter that much to you?
I try to not go down to 22 lands in too many matchups, especially when both of them represent a black source.
How about Elvish Spirit Guide?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to. I think it is a matchup where you do want to maximize speed, but the difference between 7 and 8 is kind of marginal.
Well, like the other way around is like, is Elvish Reclaimer really not better than like Veil of Summer? Like, just having one of the two just feels kind of weird to me.
Yeah, I'm willing to try it and see how it goes.
Or going down to 0. Just the one. Just the number 1 seemed weird to me.
Yeah, we'll try it.
Nice.
Next time I lose to Stikachu, I'll message you and blame you.
Make sure one of your Veil of Summers is like foil and the other one's normal, and then I'll take the foil one. So then you know that that's the one that would have been the Elvish Spirit Guide.
All right. I think Mavward's got me back on my initial plan. We'll go.
Oh, good. I'd rather have 0 Veils.
There we go. That's fine
Yeah.
with me. They don't have that much counter magic. I mean,
Yeah.
part of the reason is it's a semi hedge because they'll often have like a bounce spell floating around in the 75 too. So Veil's like the kind of card that can fight through their forces that also can just randomly give you an additional card to fight a potential bounce spell. So I think that's why it was there as a one of. Just like the kind of card that's just got a little bit more utility than Not of This World. But not so great that I want them both. I think that's where my thought process was initially. But maybe the Reclaimer's just better, so we'll see.
So the thing about the foils is actually something I do if I feel like a large enough quantity of games are going to be played to like come to a conclusion. Like normally when I play Magic, I feel like I'm not going to play enough games such that it would be a meaningful sample size. But if I do feel that way, like for instance, if I'm playing like 3 main deck of copies of like one card and sideboard the 4th, I will play like an alternate art or a foil one while I play my 300 games or whatever. That way I can actually build a decent sample size. yeah, I don't know, just some free advice if you feel like you're jamming tons of games.
Foil time. So the next one's not really a super popular matchup anymore, so we can just go through this one really quick.
It also seems kind of straightforward in terms of what you bring in.
Yep. Painter's just the anti-artifact cards and the Sylvan Library since they can't pressure us. And they basically... Another deck that I don't think we really see Dead Gone from, so they're not going to have any way of instant speed removing the tokens. So Not of This World is kind of bad. Needle does interact with a decent portion of their deck and theoretically shuts off their win condition with Grindstone, but usually when they have the Painter out, you're about to get blasted anyway. So either they're going to blast your Dark Depths to script your combo, or they'll just blast the Needle and kill you. So it's not exactly something you want to lean on to stop them from winning the game. And again, they have some cards sometimes, so the acceleration that we cut as a pedal, that's all pretty straightforward. And more straightforward is the single.
Oh wait, I have a question.
Sure.
Is
What's
the
your
Ghost
question,
Quarter? Is the Ghost Quarter better than the pedal?
So.
Or the Bog for that matter. Well, no, sorry, Bog's good against Welder. Yeah. Whatever.
They have multiple. They not only have the Welder, they have the Engineer now too, which tutors for a card and puts it into the graveyard, and then so they have multiple graveyard. The Bog's good, but I guess the reason that the Ghost Quarter's still there is primarily just, again, don't want to cut down the 22
being a lands,
and it's a land that fixes our mana at times too.
Can we play pedal over Elvish Spirit Guide to have the extra black source?
We definitely could do that.
But this one has Force of Vigor, so having extra green card. All right, I'm sold.
Yeah, Force of Vigor plus Painter sometimes runs Karn too. So all of that mixed together just makes that pedal slightly worse, I think.
I'm in.
So the best deck in the format, Rogue Delver. We have a really complicated sideboard plan here of bringing in 2 cards that kill the card Delver of Secrets, that also kill the card Dreadhorde Arcanist. And we bring out 2 cards that, one that does absolutely nothing in the matchup, and the other that is just the worst of the rest.
I think I would like pedal over Elvish Spirit Guide for the black source.
So the reason that I don't do that here is because the number... Daze. Yes, but the number of players that will daze is almost 95% of the players will snap daze your first discard spell. And normally, whatever, because we can often, most of the time, they're balanced post-board is Submerge, and we can engineer spots where we don't have to have a forest in play when we eventually combo. So I'm not really concerned about the discard resolving, except that the single easiest way to lose versus this deck is a resolved unanswered Arcanist. So setting them back a turn is just beyond enormous, where we actively want them to be encouraged to daze at all times, and then we want the option of paying or not. And if the pedal's sitting in play, we don't have to play the pedal per se, but then we don't have the option of paying or not. So
that's it seems like this one's a lot more about like interplay and the fact that like you're kind of preying on the fact that the Rug Delver player might not be playing in an optimal way or something like that.
Yeah, we don't want to give them the decision, and we want the decision on whether or not we want that discard spell to resolve based on how they act.
Yeah, I like that, and I like that people listening to this could hear that explanation, because I think that's like a very key thing that did not stand out to me when you have listed pedal there. So I think this is great.
Yeah, and we're narrow on our answers. Like we don't have the space in the board where we can, I mean, I guess we could, but we'd be giving up a lot of percentages elsewhere to up the decay number to 3 or 4. And even decks that run 3 or 4 decays have a hard time like having the decay and the mana for the decay on time to stop the Arcanist. And once that thing triggers once or twice, the game's just over. Like they're just going to snowball Wastelands, snowball Threats No-Go, snowball their 7 free counter spells. And it's just something that just the whole game revolves around that card at times.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Oh, look, we did Sneak and Show and Snowco. Look at that. We got a double skip right here.
And Strifophile's similar to a few decks, but
It's sort of, except that we're really leaning on the Veils because they're well, it's an 80 card deck now. So, and it only runs a couple of main deck answers. So
I look away for a few months, and now it's an 80 card deck.
Mavward, not against Delver. The spot that it's not really on this spreadsheet because it's not a super heavily.
They said to scroll over more because.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, it's not letting me go. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, we did Rogue.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Matt's always looking out. So it's 80 cards, and main deck it really only has like a Caracas, sometimes a Jace, sometimes a Brazen Borrower. So you're looking at like 1 to 3 answers to a 2020 in the entire 80 cards. And then post board they have a little bit more. He has a crop rotation that comes in, maybe like a additional bounce spell, that kind of stuff. But the main way his deck interacts with us in game 1 is he has 4 copies of Assassin's Trophy. So even post board, when he's up to like 4 or 5, or when they're up to 4 or 5 answers in an 80 card deck, that's still
5 trophies.
No, I'm just saying like 4 or 5 answers outside of trophies, not a lot in an 80 card deck. So we can normally fight through the handful of answers relatively easily. But sometimes the trophies, he has a decent amount of counter magic, so we can't always get the trophy out of the hand with just the discard alone. So having the extra Veils that can help fight through the counter magic for some of like our key spells like crop rotations, but also answer about half of his answers to us comboing is a pretty good spot. So they're much better there than they are in some of the other matchups. And I don't think like compared to like Snowco and Miracles, we don't need to like cram a bunch of Sylvan Safekeepers in the deck because his deck has a lot of removal. He's got like the Grove Fire Engine with deck, and then the blue-black removal spell that's also a counter spell that I'm blanking on the name of, Drown in the Lock, and just a variety of other removal. So Safekeepers aren't likely to stick around. So that's the major difference compared to the other control decks.
So the amount of like the way the interaction lines up, does it not make you want to cut Reclaimer at all?
Yeah, that is definitely an option. There have been lots of games where Reclaimer has just died. But that's actually probably like a good play draw thing. Because I've run into games, one thing his deck does not have a lot of is 1 casting cost removal. Like it's overloaded on the 2. So maybe there are Reclaimers, the type of card where we 1-on-1, because we're generally, if we get an activation out of it, that's enough. Like we're either going to have the other piece or have another tier.
Just another crop rotation that trades with a removal spell.
Yeah, after you've already rotated. So it's probably fine to cut on the draw.
I think I agree.
The issue is what's actually better. Like the needles aren't very good because they have a 1 of Caracas and so post board 2 of Caracas with crop rotation and Caracas in an 80 card deck. It can name Dak Faden.
So the other card I'm just thinking about is Sylvan Library. Like you can try to stress the trophies that way.
That's true. Yeah, I think I like that on the draw.
Yeah, just like plow them over with your like Thoughtseize and like inherent like mana or card advantage, like mana advantage and like threatening the combo, or like card advantage through like clearing the way for your Sylvan Library.
No, I like that.
I mean, I might even like Library on the play, to be honest, but
yeah.
like if they trophy you, then that might just ramp you into like you having more mana is good at like pushing this like inherent advantage of like threatening the combo.
Yeah. Not sure I ever actually finished the answer to Mavward. No, that's all good. Just getting back to it before I forget. No Leyline against Delver, but where I will bring it in is against Pokepile, because that deck is very reliant on Arcanist and very reliant on Euro. So it's actually pretty good there. I didn't make a spot for that deck in the sheet. It's fairly new deck, and percentage of the meta wise, I don't think it's a huge percent, but maybe that's a deck I'll if it continues to show up, something that I can add later. So next on the list is Bryant Cook.
So he has his one of my biggest fans, actually.
Bryant Cook and Alex have their own slot on the spreadsheet, and anyone participating in their challenge fall into this category. So, this is basically one of the primary reasons why I started messing with traps when this became more popular, and Oops All Spells became an actual deck. I don't know if you've seen that.
Like he's in a weird place again. I thought it was just gonna be companions, but now this.
Yeah, luckily I don't think Oops is all that good. I didn't even add it to the sheet yet. For anyone who's interested, all the graveyard hate, and if you're running traps, it's really not hard. Just mulligan.
Out.
What's that?
You need to tell them what to take out. That's the hard part.
Okay. So Ghost Quarter doesn't really particularly have text. You don't really need step either. This is the one kind of matchup where you can really get away with cutting down an extra land, because the games are all about the first turn or two and don't really matter beyond that. They often kill themselves into your surgical extractions and things like that, or you've just shut them down with, if you're on the play, if you could hit them with a single discard spell and take the one payoff, because there's only 8 payoffs in the deck, you may just be able to win before they draw another payoff. There's not a lot of layers here, so Not of This World has no text in the matchup, so you can cut those. The Reclaimer is probably cuttable. You're not really going to get to turn 2. They're either going to kill you early or they're not, or you're going to shut them down early. So I cut the Not of This World, the Reclaimer, the Ghost Quarter, and this Step as starting points, and that's enough room to bring in all of the artifact removal. You can shave some other stuff down if you have traps too. You don't want to cut the Needles, because Needles can name the Undercity Informer, which is half of their win cons. Some of the versions are either running 2 copies main or board a couple of copies of Charbelcher in to try and dodge the graveyard hate. So Needles are also good versus that particular setup. Yeah, that's generally the gist of the Oops All Spells matchup. Nice. On the draw, mulligan to turn 0 interaction. On the play, discard plus fast combo, or discard plus interaction, or crop rotation for Bog. Pretty straightforward. Were one of their worst matchups, I would assume. So Storm, with this version, TES is pretty hard. There are 4 main deck Veil of Summer deck against our 8 discard spell deck. So when they're on the play, it's just, we're kind of hoping they do something like just Ponder without a pedal behind it, or run one piece of like a Mox or something plus a land into a Wishclaw pass kind of situation. Those are the kind of openings we're hoping for, as opposed to like Fetch Land Go or Tropical Island Go or something along those lines where it's just cringeworthy. We have Needles and stuff to name Wishclaw, and hopefully we get to fire off some of our discard cleanly and have a quick combo. But post-board, the Collector Roof is obviously very good. There are Chrome Mox, Mox Opal, Lion's Eye Diamond deck, plus Wishclaw Talisman, so Oof is a serious bomb. Force of Vigor is good for the same reasons. Veil of Summer kind of looks sort of weird, but it makes them go the long way, so they can't Tendrils us. It also can, here and there, protect a Collector Oof. It also protects some of our other permanents, like a 20/20, from their bounce spells, because normally they're bringing in a couple of Chain of Vapors right now, I think, given their current list. Sometimes it's more than that, depending on the version or what else is going on in the meta. They sometimes have Echoing Truth too. Right now, I think it's just Chain of Vapor, but they have some number of bounce spells that are going to come in, and in particular, if you don't shut off their Wish Claw Talisman, if they have 2 mana up, you can't combo at the end of their turn without them having, even if they're down to somehow a 1 of Chain of Vapor, if they have an active Wish Claw and you go at the end of their turn, they just tutor for Chain of Vapor and bounce it. So Veils are good as an answer there. The Graveyard Hate is really something that I'm not 100% sold on. I think there's pluses and minuses to both Surgical and Leyline. So they're often going to put a lot of their permanents into the graveyard with their Echo lines. So you can do things like Surgical, their LEDs, and make it harder post-Echo. Mm-hmm. I don't particularly love that. I don't think it's great. Sometimes you can hit a piece with a discard spell in Surgical, like a Burning Wish or something, and try to make it harder on them. But sometimes you can bust up their Brainstorms, but they are a Veil deck, so the discard into breaking up a Brainstorm isn't a line I'm in love with if they have open mana. The Leylines, on the other hand, shut off their turn 1 Echo lines, and basically they're locked into hard casting that card, period, or going in another direction.
So there's 2 things that I kind of want to point out or discuss. So one of them is like back in part 1, I only know this because it's alphabetical order. We talked about Ant and how the matchup dynamic was there between both of you guys throwing discard spells at each other, you being a little bit leaner of a deck and relying on lands to win, whereas you can like disrupt and take their win cons, but they're kind of a better top decking deck than you. If I recall, that was kind of like the interaction.
That's a piece of it, yeah.
Whereas like against Tess doesn't have like that type of disruption. Instead, like they're playing Veils, they're playing ways of just like doing what Ants sometimes would like to do in the matchup, I guess you could say. Like they have the ability to go fast and like set up these Wish Claw Talismans that are very annoying for us.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm not sold on any of the Graveyard Hate being great, so I think you're kind of just picking and choosing. Like ideally, if you're really, really are struggling with this matchup and want some help in some of the other combo matchups too, you can just do what some of the more recent lists have been doing and run some number of Mind Break traps too. And those can just eat up those slots coming in, because Mind Break traps are just really, really good against that deck. Like they have to, like the pilot has to be like very mindful of them to not get blown out, and they only have a handful of ways to play around it. So like they're kind of limited to 2 lines. They have to either find or tutor for a defense grid to try and shut it out that way to keep you off of the 3 extra mana to pay for it, or Burning Wish for the singleton copy of Thoughtseize, or if they board the single copy of Thoughtseize in Wish Claw for it. So one of the 4, whichever way, whether it's in the sideboard or the main deck, they have 4 tutors to get the 1 of Thoughtseize, and then they have I think they're up to 3 copies of Defense Grid now. But still, that's kind of limiting, and sometimes it's hard to piece all of that together when we're also doing things like needling Wish Claw Talisman and firing off discard spells, and have other annoying permanents like Collector Oof, and are presenting our own combo that they have to, if they can't kill us, they have to be prepared for with a bounce spell. So it's not the easiest thing in the world for them to do to play through the Mind Break trap, and sometimes they just can't do it at all. But so if you really want help in the matchup, that's where to go. But with this particular version, I think the cards we're boarding out are just a combination of too slow. Like they're not interacting with our hand at all, so we don't need as many tutors. We're going to be able to piece together our combo with the first piece of all of it. So like the first tutor gets the missing combo piece, so we don't really need 9 tutors in the main deck. The Reclaimer is glacial for this matchup. So Karakas has no text. Bog, it's very rare that there's going to be like an exposed Echo in the yard or something like that would get hit.
Well, you can also like crop rotation into like hitting Rite of Flame or something like that, right?
You can, but if you're using crop rotation to bog them off of 1 mana specifically, like you're going to need some pretty important...
Well, it could be more if they have multiple... Oh, I guess it's always just 1 mana. Well, no, if they have like 2 Rite of Flames in hand and you remove the first one, that's 2 mana.
Yeah, theoretically, if there's a situation where like a discard is taken and Rite of Flame, or they use their right to power out, like, or to cast an early Burning Wish or something along those lines, and then they have 2 more, then yeah, it could be more than 1 mana. But I think
it seems like Bog can be better than Ghost Quarter. Was going to be my observation.
I can sort of see that. I think my thing is like the amount of games where maybe I'm just biased based on the number of games that I've played with this deck, but it feels like openings like Bayou into turn 2, floating a black off the Bayou, ghost quartering your Bayou for a basic swamp, tapping the basic swamp for X Mage, and then having like crop ESG for depths comes up a decent amount. Like the black source comes up a decent amount, and Bog coming into play tapped is a very real cost in a matchup where it's going to come down to a
like speed or just consistency. Yeah, like sack a land, get a black untapped is just that much more important than like this marginal use. So I'm cool with that.
Yeah, and Alex is mentioning like messing up the mana of the TES play with the Ghost Quarter, but very similar to the surgical play, there are situations where on turn 2 or turn 3, if you have a window to play a discard spell and they brainstorm, you can Ghost Quarter their land, and then they have to choose between their hidden cards and just getting strip mined.
You can also run like an end of turn, like if you just draw it, you can like, if they have an exposed green source and that's like their only source up, I'm assuming they don't play like basic forest.
There's no basic forest too, so you can navigate through Veil that way too if you wanted to.
Yeah, where you would just like end of turn, like do it, or like
it doesn't even have to be end of turn. It could just be first main, second main too.
Well, in theory, you would do it end of draw step. I mean, I guess in your deck, first main and second main are the same, but then like in theory, they could like play the Veil, but then maybe you could just fire off the discard next turn. So
you always run basic forest in your TES deck, Matt. TES decks don't often run like Knight of the Reliquary and Questing Beast, Matt. I think you've got your names wrong. Yeah. It's a little bit harder to do that, but yeah, that could also work. So I think the only basic in the Alex is getting at is the only basic in the deck is a swamp.
Yeah, I figured.
So some uses. I don't think that's going to come up too much, but I think it's probably going to come up more than bogging the multiple Rite of Flames line, because I don't even bog Ant off Cabal Ritual all that often.
That's fine.
Oftentimes you're just, unless you know what the last cards are to know what their specific mana requirements are, you might just be like firing it off into the abyss, like literally. So all right, so
yeah, I'm cool with this.
Yeah, so Blue Red Delver is identical to Rogue Delver, except their bounce spells are a little bit different. You just unlike Rogue Delver, them having just a single blue source up doesn't necessarily mean you're safe. These versions usually do run like a 1-of Vapor Snag either in the main or the sideboard, so that's just something to be aware of before you walk into it. But yeah, other than that, the dynamics are really similar. Obviously, you can't use Ghost Quarter against them like you can Rug. Like oftentimes Rug will have like a flip Delver that they'll leave back to block, planning on playing Oko the following turn. But they only have 3 lands because obviously not a super land heavy deck, and you can go ahead and just like Ghost Quarter their Trop, and then they just can't cast the Oko, that kind of stuff. Can't get away with those kind of plays against Blue Red, but luckily they don't have Oko, so it's all good.
Yep.
So
really what you're saying is the solution is to play like Island or whatever in Rug, and then you'll have a harder time.
I have seen that. That's been a thing that people have tried. I just think the overwhelming consensus is that that's not the right setup, or it's not worth the cost, I guess.
For what's worth, I also agree with that.
That's not worth the cost.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's...
I mean, I paid so much money for these dual lands, I am going to use them.
That's fair. How many times do you get Ghost Quartered in a given tournament anyway?
Me? I don't know. I don't know if I've ever been Ghost Quartered. No, I'm just kidding.
You've never played me on Ghost Quarter. Oh.
It's true. So I can at least cross that one off.
Nice. All right, so good old-fashioned Stoneblade for people that also don't like 2019, 2020 cards. So it's not that different than most of the other control decks. Similar setup. Ks are a little bit better because you can hit the blade or hit the Stoneforge before the Batterskull can come in, kind of thing. But yeah, pretty similar otherwise. The only thing that I like sometimes wonder about is cutting all of the needles. Like sometimes it's like a fairly decent play to just needle the Stoneforge after they get the Batterskull, but I don't know. I just haven't felt that card carried as much weight as the other potential pieces coming in. Like we know they're going to have 4 Swords to Plowshares plus maybe a couple of other sneaky cards out of the sideboard that the Safekeepers are great against. The Ks just fill a similar role but are a little bit more versatile.
Yep.
Sylvan Library is a little bit questionable, I guess, because there are hands that they can put a decent amount of pressure on. But they are a plow deck, so I think they're worth it.
I like it. I'm just double checking that there's nothing else I want to cut.
We do not need to play more Tabernacles, Mats.
Oh, that's what that meant.
I'm assuming that's back from the TES conversation, but I don't die to goblins all that often versus TES. It's usually in spectacular fashion. They're normally doing things
I'm good with this.
Drawing 20-something cards and, grape shotting us for 21 or, that sort of thing. It's usually not the goblins. All right, Mats. We expect a lot of feedback on this particular deck. Help us make this better against you specifically. So, 4-color Loam is... luckily, they don't generally run Swords to Plowshares in the main deck, which is nice.
Nor have a wide following, so we don't have to worry that much about the deck.
Wow. The hate.
I actually like 4-color Loam. It's like I mentioned how like Death and Taxes and Maverick are like more of like my favorite decks if I were to like get into Legacy again or something like that. 4-color Loam's actually another one that I actually do like a lot.
Okay, fair enough. Well, since you're well versed in it, and you're
no, I don't know anything about it. It's just a deck. If I were to,
you've done hours of research. I can tell.
Yeah, it's just like when I first started Legacy, I was like, okay, I just want to play like the Brainstorm deck that has the most decisions, and at the time, I just felt like that had to be Delver variants. But like that could have led instead to me picking up Rishadan Ports and I guess Wastelands are both, but like Ports and whatever else was Caracas was expensive at the time. Or I was thinking about picking up cards for Loam, but then I ended up just picking up duels.
Nice.
I like blue duels.
Probably a better investment for you too if you ever decide to move on from those cards. I think Port's been reprinted a few times.
Yeah. I even have like Death and Taxes on Magic Online now, or like I did like a year ago, but I figured it would actually take way too much time to learn.
Well, now you're gonna need to pick up some new cards. They got 3 new printings in the most recent set.
No, I'm just gonna go back into my hole and whatever I'm doing these days.
Fair enough.
Like starring on streams like this.
I hope the rest of your life is going better for you.
Oh, it's going fantastic.
It's awesome.
All right, so yeah, I don't even know what time zone Matt's is in, but let's get this done for him.
There you go. So basically, they're bringing in Swords to Plowshares out of the board to go with the already fairly decent number of interactive cards against the combo, with the whole Wasteland, Caracas, fun stuff that they've got going on. So bringing in the Decay as a catch-all, hits the Chalice, hits the Knight, yada yada. They're often not putting a ton of pressure on, so I think the Sylvan's fine as well. And if the 2020 gets plowed, again, draw 4 or 5 cards. And Safekeepers is just protection from the Caracas, the Swords, Maze, all that fun stuff. And on the other side, I think the Duresses against this particular deck aren't great. Can afford to. We know we're not going to be generally able to kill them fast. They're usually going to have some form of interaction, so we can trim a little speed. And the Caracas, I don't think, does enough to be worthwhile. So
I don't think I have any objections here, other than once again just questioning the low spell versus spirit guide thing.
That conversation is already dead.
Well, in this case, like I feel like the pedal's just better than the spirit guide. Like I don't know how much surprise spirit guide matters, but I still like having the second black in this like scenario. Like having access to the second black easier, I guess I'm saying.
So you mean what? Just cutting 3 spirit guides?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think there's ever a scenario, even if they leave Chalice in, I don't think they're really Chalice zeroing us. I think that's really the only spot that would get massively punished for that.
Wait. Oh, never mind. I was trying to figure out how you like just updated the number like from 2 to 3, but then I realized you copy and pasted. That's how you did it. Oh, you figured out the cut button.
It wasn't really complicated. I just didn't know what the key was, to be honest.
Jeez. X for cut? Man, it's like scissors.
Uh-oh. Mats is chiming in.
But like in terms of being afraid, like how differently are you playing versus like the times that us not having the second black matters or like having access to another black source matters? Like I guess you're saying you're afraid of spirit guide for situations where like we might crop rotation and you were thinking about like interacting with our mana base with the wasteland. But then like if you're already living like in fear of that, then we don't need a spirit guide.
This is even better. We're getting added advantage. It's like people playing around days after we boarded out 3 of the 4 dazes.
Yeah. Yeah, I am curious about Matt's point of view.
All right, Mats, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it this way to try and extract more value, and you're going to continue to play around Spirit Guide and pretend that you didn't hear any of this conversation. And definitely don't tell anyone else. So this is how it's going to be. Anyone with a history of 4-color loam is going to be blocked from viewing this document. And that's how we're just going to handle it.
Well, yeah, it's easier to play around pedal, but like 4-color loam, if I recall correctly, isn't like a discard deck or anything. So like you are playing around this, you are choosing whether or not to play around the spirit guide. And the only times it matters for us having the spirit guide is the times where you choose a play that plays into spirit guide. But if you're already respecting it, then we don't want it.
And he might be kind of saying that he doesn't have a choice at times, but
if that's true, then we should be applying more spirit guides than the pedals. It was just my assumption that the average player would want to play around this card and then just wait until it gets like better for them, such as like not wastelanding until it's like a spot where you're going for it. That way you're getting like more value out of it or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we probably would need to have like active conversations with a lot of opponents in a lot of matches before we could discern what the actual cause of their plays is.
So if the argument you're making, Matt, is that one can never play around Spirit Guide, then yes, we should play more Spirit Guides. Addressing the other chat comment from Shotscape, it's talking about surgical extraction in the matchup. Would you be able to talk about that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. Let's see, I'll pull up the most recent list. But Loam's usually not run in numbers. So this deck has 2. And no other way to interact with the graveyard that I can see in the 75. There's no excavator. So it's just 2 life from the Loams. I don't think we want to be in a spot where we're trying to fight a 2 of. That oftentimes the most devastating thing it's going to do is its first cast anyway. So if they wasteland us and then try to loam back the wasteland, what are we going to do? Are we going to surgical their wasteland? I mean, I guess we could, but then they still have an active loam in a deck that has Blast Zone, Karakas, Mazavith, and a variety of other Tranquil Thicket to start a draw engine. It just doesn't seem like we want to be bringing in cards to fight that when it's hard to imagine like a profitable spot where that could come up. And the one of Euro too, I don't think that's really something we want to be bringing in surgical to try and fight.
Well, so I understand the argument you're making, Matt. It's like, but the thing is, like, we don't have to have the pedal in play. We can just also have the, like, I guess you're under the assumption that we're like playing a scrying or like tapping out or something, but like, and yes, you do get free wins with like Elvish Spirit Guide, but the question is just like, how many more times are you winning those because you have the Elvish Spirit Guide versus the times that you need the extra black source? And like, I'm willing to believe that these like numbers aren't right, that like people feel like that they're priced in, so we need to have it more. I was just under the assumption that people would respect it more. Well, like, only if we play like a card like Sylvan Scrying. But like in that game, in that like, so sure, like if let's assume that is the case. I play Lotus Petal, and then you choose to not play Knight of the Reliquary because you know you need to leave something up. The question then becomes, am I still losing that game? Like there are like in the problem is we're talking about like a very small period of time, and we're not looking at like where the outcomes are changed based on it. So like if you like, I understand in that exact exchange, you like wouldn't choose to play Knight of the Reliquary, but the question is, how many more games am I losing because you chose not to play Knight of the Reliquary because of play Lotus Petal, versus a game that's really just surrounding like probability of like not having the extra black source for Lotus Petal, which is something that's like easier to quantify, which is probably why I think more in that direction.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe it's because I've played so many matches from the depth side that maybe I have like my own little ingrained bias here, but I feel like the lines where Spirit Guide could actually kill them are pretty transparent. So like if we go tap out to play a Hex Mage on turn 1 with a pedal or on turn 2 with 2 lands, like if I tap out and play Hex Mage Go, that kind of has like a neon sign, like maybe you should be worried about Elvish Spirit Guide crop rotation, because otherwise, especially if you could have 3 mana on your turn, because otherwise I'm exposing the Hex Mage to an Engineer, to a random Abrupt Decay, to things like that. So if I'm just throwing that thing in play, that kind of signals that I probably have Spirit Guide crop rotation, or I'm bluffing Spirit Guide crop rotation, or maybe the Hex Mage just doesn't matter in the overall scheme of the hand. And same thing with the stage line. Like if it's like stage land go, or stage land pedal go, you know, the radar should be up that like I'm only 1 mana away from comboing, and you should kind of be paying attention to like Spirit Guide, or even if it's like stage depths pedal go or something, that you should be aware. Like, I don't know, it seems like it would be fairly clear when the Spirit Guide would actually kill you in those spots. I don't know, but maybe I'm just not viewing it from the other side of the table enough. But I feel like...
so the major difference for me is that like the fact that 4-color loam is a deck that's not looking at your hand, that it just becomes a question of like where the game ends up being different and what percent of the time someone feels like they have to like respect Elvish Spirit Guide or not. Let me see if I could come up with a good example.
Well, Matt says one right there. Like he's saying, the lines where he loses to it are stage depths, random land, and he has a chalice in play, shutting off crop. Like, but like kind of like Jonathan, like you're well aware that Spirit Guide will kill you there, so like you're actively choosing whether to play around it or not.
Like in that scenario, if you do choose to play Lotus Petal and you don't have access to the other Spirit Guide because you boarded it out, like, are you losing that many more of the games? Like, it's about the difference of games won. It's not like there's a subset of games where this decision doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. That like I think the statistical advantage of having more black mana will win you more games than the ability to punish someone for going for it. But I don't know like what the hive mind like consensus is of the 4-color loam people, because if I did know that, then I would like the latter is just harder for me to quantify right now. So I could believe that like if the percentage of times you're playing into like Elder Spirit Guides above like 60 or 70, then yes, we do need to have it more because people are just playing into it.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the example he gave, he has a chalice out on one. So even if we had a petal that was transparent,
it's not any different.
Yeah, you don't. 4-color loam doesn't have access to plow at that point. So unless they specifically add like a Mazavith in hand that they could play instead of playing a land into night or something like that seems like it would be kind of corner case. Or unless it involved like tapping Crocus as part of playing the night, that sort of thing. But that's only like 2 lands in the deck versus, plus having a 3-drop to play in that spot. I don't know.
So I guess like I already made my point about like the statistical thing versus just like this. The Black Source thing is something we quantify in literal just math, and then the other one's just like player psychology or like research, like understanding like where people are at. The other thing that is interesting to me about the comment that like if the pedals face up, you're going to make a different line that like allows the game to go slower, and that going slower is better for you. If that is true, then people won't play into the Spirit Guide because it's better for you if you wait later. So then you should just always play like the Lotus Petals in play. So it's just not any different, which means it's better for us to have Lotus Petal. Like that comment helps the argument to play more Lotus Petals if it going on later is better for you.
Well,
that's true. I'm not considering the decay line as much. But like, if I'm worried about decay, wouldn't I just not play the Lotus Petal?
I think he's kind of getting at like, so say it's our turn 3. So to use his example, we have depth stage random land. We play Petal. Say we're on the play, and he had Bayou and another duel, whatever up. We have to play the Petal out to be able to combo. So our end step, he decays the Petal, which puts us to the decision of whether or not to go for it or not on our own end step, which means we have to either have an Out of This World or something, or we just lose to a Caracas in his hand, we just lose to a Kaya,
sure,
that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of what he's getting at, is that with the Petal as opposed to the Spirit Guide, he can put us to the test earlier with a turn behind it. And yeah, I don't know what the
but what I'm trying to say is that if the game's better for you if you go later and we play the Petal and you decay it and we just don't go for it, even if we have nothing else and that was our whole game plan, you still won't go for it. Like, you still won't do your whatever thing because we can still have Elvish Spirit Guide. Like, as long as you're choosing to play around Elvish Spirit Guide and say that your late game is better, that exchange is just whatever for me. Like, Like
That's
I'm not convinced that matters as long as I never call because since I know that you believe that you have the late game, I just should never go for it there.
That's fair. Well, I think this is going to be a good experiment to see how this turns out anyway. So at this point, I'm interested in the results.
Yeah, and like I'm not trying to say I'm right. I'm really just trying to explain. Like once again, it's like there's just a range of percentages that people can be playing into Elvish Spirit Guide and or be believing that they have the better late game, such that one sideboarding is better than the other. Because whereas playing more Lotus Petals is a literal just like statistical quantity that we could talk about. Sure, we're also getting a free decay out of your hand, and we get another turn as well.
Well, Matt, the plus side is if you think that this is definitely the wrong side of the argument, I'm going to try it, which means that you're better off in the matchup. So it's win-win on your side. You'd be winning the argument, and you'd be winning in gameplay.
Well, if you're telling me that I also get to choose with my Lotus Petals, if I just get to make you play a decay, that seems exploitable. Like, what if I just have, like, I don't know, a Reclaimer that I drew later and a Lotus Petal I haven't played yet? I'm just going to be like, all right, I can play this Lotus Petal. You're going to decay. I'm not going to do anything. Then I get to play Reclaimer next turn.
All right, well, I don't think we're going to be able to settle this.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to present both sides. And once again, I don't actually think I'm right. Like, I think it's just probabilities. And, like, whichever one, like, you can just announce what you think the probability is of people playing a certain way. Then that dictates what you're supposed to sideboard at.
That isn't what I wanted to do.
12 posts, the last one.
I don't think I can scroll over all the way, so I don't know if this is on the screen or not. Yeah, there it is. Good. Okay. So they are another crop rotation deck. They usually run Caracas, Maze, sometimes Glacial Chasm, sometimes Reclaimer. Well, most of the time Reclaimer, Expedition Map, that kind of stuff. Not putting pressure on us really at all until their late game stuff comes down. So I think Sylvan Library is great. K is kind of a nice catch-all. Sometimes on the play, you can catch an Expedition Map. Sometimes you catch a Reclaimer early. Safekeepers are great for Caracas and Maze. They don't really do much with their graveyard, so Bog, I think, is an easy cut. Trimming a little bit of the acceleration, and discard's not particularly great against them. Inquisition in particular, because once you get past the first turn or two, a lot of the cards are over 3 casting cost in their deck that matter. So it's kind of just where it is. Nothing too crazy going on here. Their crop rotations are significantly worse because they don't have wasteland type effects. So the Safekeeper just kind of just shuts down all their crop rotation targets other than Glacial Chasm, which we generally, unless they have like a stage plus a Glacial Chasm setup, we can just kind of blow through that with Ghost Quarter too. We can even needle a stage if we have to, if we think that that's something that they can do over a couple of turns. So Safekeepers are generally pretty good. They're not knocking any of our lands off the table, so even if we have to wait out a Caracas for a couple of turns before we find the Ghost Quarter, we can often do that.
Sorry, what's the abrupt decay before? I was typing something.
Sometimes we can get lucky, and if we're on the play or if one of their first couple of turns involves a tapped land, they'll expose an Expedition Map. But more importantly are the Elvish Reclaimers, which are actually a pretty solid card.
Are we allowed to play a second?
Probably. We're never not allowed to play something.
I mean, allowed to in a very different way.
Yeah, so the most recent list has 4 Reclaimers, so the Shepherd doesn't particularly matter in the matchup. Excavator is actually probably fine because we're probably not getting rid of the utility land until we're ready to kill them.
I don't think McAfee likes this deck.
I mean, It's just being.
It just doesn't like the Eldrazi's, I'm sure.
It's just warning legacy players to stay away from this deck. Yeah, the second needle should definitely be in here now that I'm looking at this list because they run four pithing needles. So that's definitely a mistake that's not two.
Jeez, do we need forces at some point?
Yeah, I don't know if that is quite good enough because there's literally no other targets.
Can we board out step, or do they have anything that interacts?
Well, so we have to keep one of Caracas or step because one thing they could definitely do is end up with a 2020 off their stage. They also have depths too, so they could easily end up with a 2020. So we can't end up as stalemate. So we need one or the other. And I guess the argument for keeping step in would be specifically that there's a non-zero chance we'd end up needling Caracas. Which if we end up doing that, we need a way to get through a 2020 if that ends up happening.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sold.
So let's see, what else could we actually get rid of here?
The third not of this world. But I guess you're just like, they have a lot of ways to look for the lands that you just are so confident.
Yes, it's weird. So we want a little bit of discard to strip out their Reclaimers and Tutors. We also want to keep max Tutors because there's a decent chance we're going to need to go find the Ghost Quarter for one of their utility lands, or specifically Glacial Chasm. The Needles are great because not only do they have the option of naming Caracas and Mezavith, but also the 4 Reclaimers are a great needle target. So,
are we allowed to cut another fast mana?
Yeah, I could see that. I probably would do a second Spirit Guide, I think.
Yeah, that's what I would do. In my, depths, expertise, whatever. Expert opinion.
Yeah, I don't know how I got to 1 decay initially, but I must have been on something really good that night.
It could be possible that, like, did the sideboard change at all? Like maybe there's only 1 decay at the time, or maybe
that would be a really good excuse. But I don't think I've ever been below 2 decays. I appreciate the help though. I'm just gonna say that was just a mistake.
Yeah,
and eat it.
People make those all the time.
Hey, want to hear something sweet?
Let's hear it.
We got through roughly 40 legacy decks.
Yeah, I can't believe we finished Infinity time already. Yeah, you told me I was going to be here pretty much for the rest of the time, but
that wasn't too bad. Here I am. It was about 2 hours ish.
Yeah.
It was way faster.
Sorry, can you hear that? There's a noise outside. I just want to make sure it doesn't come through.
I didn't hear anything other than your voice.
Nice. I have a pretty sensitive mic, and I'm never sure, but I think it's a more unidirectional mic or whatever they're called. Like I'm talking at it, but the sound's back there. But there are times where the train passes by and I'm in a video call and they're just like, Jonathan, do you live right next to the train station? I'm like, wait, I swear people can't hear that. So who knows? Oh, I have a lot better of a noise gate thing in Discord, so maybe it's
nice.
But yeah, I'm glad we're able to finish this. So
thanks for all 3 times you completed the trilogy.
Yeah.
And I think when you agreed to do this, you were thinking we were gonna bang through this in an hour or two. And
I won't lie that was the case, but I've definitely enjoyed the whole journey. I feel like I've learned a lot more about your perspective, various comments and chats perspective, and I feel like I was able to grow as a person as well, while also expressing opinions and things that I'm not as active in terms of playing Magic as I was before. I still follow it. I still talk, read spoilers, watch Anurag stream. But there's certain core concepts and philosophies we have as Magic players that don't really change over time, and I'm glad that I'm able to still put that to good use here.
Yeah, I've found your thoughts extremely insightful throughout and very helpful. I think you've challenged my positions basically in every matchup. We're very close to it, so I found them incredibly useful. I'm sure you're going to be doing something again soon because I know Honorog's second invitational sub number triggered a while ago. So
Wait, I didn't even know that. I hope I got called back for that commentary booth. Oh, that was so sweet.
I don't see why you wouldn't. I thought all of you, Jarvis, Edgar, I thought you guys did a tremendous job on that event.
That's also the trilogy, or whatever they're called, the trio.
The trio.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would assume that that's going on. Although I'm not sure what the deal is specifically because I know he was working with one of the stores, I want to say, as far as getting, I don't know whether it was how it was going to be run or prize support. I'm not 100% sure what he was doing, but I know it was more intricate than previously.
Yeah, I remember he was looking for like sponsorship opportunities or ways of making it easier for him.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. So, but yeah, I have no doubt that if he's running the show, that you'll be back and doing commentary.
Yeah, and I'd be more than happy to both do that, and if you want me on for some sort of update or even playing through a league or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the next one. I think this was
part 4.
Part 4 will be actually playing Magic.
Yeah, we can reference the sideboard guide, and we can even use like different lists and kind of like show in real time how we're not literally just looking at this like sideboard guide as numbers, and we're not using it as a strict like this is what you always do. You'll hear us in part 4 kind of explain that, okay, we saw these things. How likely do we think this is a, let's say, like Karn Echo deck that is going to have like bounce spells in their sideboard when we saw these things in game 1 and stuff like that. So judging by the probability of things happening and reading into your opponents and how they're playing, it can change what you do, along with the fact that we might be playing a slightly different list than this. So understanding the adaptations is the next step.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really that's its own animal. Like when we're going through deck by deck, like obviously you mentioned the Karn Echo deck, but like the Omnitel deck, the one Bant splashes, you can tell off specific fetches, specific tools that they may have that may come up, whether or not you see Astrolabe. Same thing with the Infect deck. Depending on what they fetch, you can kind of there's sometimes tells as to which versions may or may not have plows in the sideboard. And so many of these decks have like alternate versions. Like just the generic board in here for elves is like your traditional Nettle Sentinel, combo push
instead of like Newton
deck.
Elves.
Yeah, and Newton Elves now has not only the Reclaimers, but
Allosaur.
Often, he has a 1 of Allosaurus. The combo version is now running 4 Allosaurus Shepherds. Julian, I think, finished top 4 in the showcase yesterday.
Nice.
With 4 of them, and said they were basically fire all the entire tournament.
Love it.
So, but yeah, Newton's version, it's not just 4 Reclaimers, but depending on the week you run into them, either 1 or 2 or 0 crop rotations and the Caracas in the board. So you're dealing with at least 4 Reclaimers and a Caracas and possibly 1 or 2 crop rotations on top of that. So, yeah, just as like a super quick thing, like if you see Reclaimers in game 1, you're not just bringing in the decays. You might want to consider like 1 or 2 Safekeepers on top of that, just as additional ways to deal with the Caracas that you can reasonably expect to see in the post-board games. And there's just so many decks that are similar to that. So yeah, we can point out all those sorts of things with whatever we happen to run into in a run through if we do a league or whatever.
Yeah, one thing that's like pretty important about this, and my overall like philosophy in Magic for the past few years, is like when you're playing a game of Magic, it has to have some sort of purpose to it. Of course, you can play Magic for fun. I'm not saying you can't do that. In terms of like tournament preparation or trying to get better, like you want to be accomplishing something, and victory doesn't necessarily correspond to like accomplishing a goal. You want to be playing to like learn and grow in some sort of way. What I don't necessarily relate to in terms of how I learn and grow in Magic is that there's tons of things you can do before you play your first match with a given deck. And I think this type of effort is one example of that. Um, like people might have heard through, various sources, like how I run like draft meetings and how I prepare for limited portions of like Pro Tours back when that happened. Despite never playing a match of like the format and reading all the cards, usually a day or two before the tournament, but I would spend so much time like premeditating situations, asking very precise questions, like running these meetings. And I was like in contention for limited master like the last year they informally had it. So I truly believe that there's so much to be gained from thinking of things outside of playing the matches, and that playing the matches is a very slow way to get things done. But I would probably say, like, if you say the best player in the world of like a given archetype is at 100%, you can probably get to like maybe 50 or 70 by just like consuming content like what we produced here, but also by doing some thinking of like common situations. Like if you gave me like this list and say Rug Delver and told me to come up with a sideboard plan, and I wanted to take it very seriously and thought about it for like a dedicated hour or 30 minutes, I'd like to think I would have came up with the days thing that Tom was talking about. But that came from like lots of experience, but there are certain things that you might be able to premeditate, and it's important to like try to optimize how you're using your time in that regard.
Couldn't agree more.
But yeah, do you have any parting words or thoughts?
Yeah. No, I'm just messing around. No, I'm really glad that as fun as this was, I'm glad that we're through it, and it's now like a resource that I can feel they can just stay out there, and people can hopefully use it, and hopefully it can help them get to a better place with the deck and get some results, that kind of stuff. Whereas before, I think it was kind of half finished and hanging out there for a while, and so I'm glad that now it's something that can officially, this 75, this is a pretty reasonable starting point for you to jump off of, and then based on your own experiences and everything else and deviations within matches, you can do what you want. And when you run into 4-color loam and realize that you're losing because you don't have that second Elvish Spirit Guide, I want you to contact at Watchwolf92 and let him know that Matt Soleil tried to warn him, and that's the most highly contentious card slot in this entire guide.
Yeah, you can feel free to message me on Twitter or whatever if that's exactly what happens to you. I think it would also be nice if in the doc you did like maybe include a way that they can like contact you or something if they feel strongly about something, like either I mean, a lot of people know your name, and
believe it or not, I left that out on purpose.
Oh, really?
I thought that just having it as like a community resource was kind of like nicer, as opposed to like a here's Negator 77, or I'm sorry, Negator Wolf 97.
Yeah, exactly. Negator Wolf 97
97 sideboard guide, like just kind of thing. And it's linked in the Discord, so like a lot of times when people have like thoughts or questions about it, they're posting in the Discord anyway, and half the time I'm the one answering, and half the time just someone that has experience with the deck is chiming in and giving their thoughts, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean,
I just want to make sure that like
I could go either way with
the
that.
one that's editing it.
I could go either way with that, but that was my initial thought, was like, because I never did that with Bug either. Like when I had the Bug thing up, I guess it was a little bit more obvious because I was like one of 3 people running Bug, whereas Turbo Dips is a much more mainstream deck. But
we got another follower.
Oh, I missed it.
Well, now's your time.
Oh, Dukes is awesome. He's more of a, I'll forgive him for this, but he's more of a Maverick type of style streamer and list, and
Maverick.
Knight of the Reliquary lovers are mine. That's my deck's natural enemy. So, but he's actually streamed. I've caught pieces of Turbo Depth streams twice this week, so maybe he's being reformed, or at least tempted away from the Knight of the Reliquary side for a little while.
Who knows?
You never know. Yeah, I find that people that tend to fall in love with that card never leave. Like Knight of the Reliquary seems to consolidate the people that love that style of deck and never let them go. It's an addictive deck. Like once you have 7/7s and 10/10 Knight of the Reliquaries that are tutoring every turn, and you're untapping them after combat damage with Maze Vith, I guess that's kind of like, addiction's probably the perfect word, since he used addictive. Once you're there, you're locked in.
It was definitely like it flew under the radar for like just a bit when it first came out, but I feel like it's definitely been a mainstay afterwards, between its time in standard and then like the various extendeds and moderns and legacy. It definitely has a lot of history to it, but it can only get better as more lands are printed.
It's true. Alex, you can run Knight of the Reliquary and Brainstorm in the same deck. There are Bant versions and other decks that do that, exactly that. Because, Brainstorm can go in any deck. You can even put Brainstorm in Dark Depth Shells. At least that's what.
Wait, what's the Brainstorm bug?
I think he's saying that sometimes you don't want to run Knight of the Reliquary. You want to run a powerful Brainstorm deck. Alex is mainly a TES pilot, but has also been known to dabble in Delver. Exactly. Knight shuffles your Brainstorm.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're catching on. Add a natural order too, and you can throw all sorts of things into your deck. You can have 10/10 protection from everything. You can have 5/6 flyers that shut off permanent or card types. You can do all sorts of fun
You can
stuff.
have another Knight of the Reliquary.
Oh, Dukes, we actually finished, so you're not interrupting anything. We just finished the last matchup about 10 or 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, no, Tom's voice is great. Mine is like just a huge range of things that occur.
I don't know what to make of either of those comments.
Your voice is great.
You do commentary regularly. How can you possibly think your voice is bad?
Well, exactly. It just like, I don't know. It just does things. I don't control it. It comes out. So Green-White Depths, I actually don't know much about it other than I remember seeing like the old, like, I guess breakout tournament for it. It was like a Syracuse or something, like Star City. And I think some lists were Green-White and some were Naya. That's all I remember though.
Yeah, so the most recent version, the version that I think he's talking about mainly is Dom Harvey did really well. There was a couple of Twitter posts maybe a month or two ago where he missed some challenges. So he ran through leagues, and I think he went like 9-1 one day, like in a stretch of 2 leagues, and then I think he 5-0'd another league. So he ended up running it in one of the bigger events. I couldn't tell you which one it was, but he ended up making the top 8 of that event with Green-White Depths.
So it got some traction, I'm guessing.
A little bit. So it's basically, could probably just pull up a list, but off the top of my head, like depending on the version,
Reliquary.
Yeah, depending on the version, it's basically like a pile of Reclaimers, a pile of Knight of the Reliquaries, that sort of main package.
Does it play like Flagstones or something weird?
So that's the thing. His version did, but the number of Flagstones really kind of varied depending on the version. So like some people were cutting them entirely that were testing the deck, and then I think at one point it may have been like up to 3 copies of Flagstone, which has like a lot of really interesting interactions. And I think Dom's main point and why they were so good is because unlike the black versions of Depths, the crop rotations are just exposed. So when you're crop rotating at a Green-White Depths, you're not clearing their hand out of counter magic. or like checking to see like when you need to play the crop rotation on their turn to play around force negation or that kind of stuff. So you have much less information, and the crop is much more likely to get countered. So,
but you're also not down the extra card because you're
yes,
sacking
in the
a
case that you're
flagstone.
sacking the flagstones, you're literally not down at all. They're just trading their counter for your crop, and your land is turning into a savanna, or whatever the situation is. So Duke's is saying it's 2 to 3 of. Yeah, that makes sense. So, and once upon a times. So, yeah, Allosaurus Shepherd is a 1 of for the Green Sun Zenith package is nice because that's like another way to make sure that your crops resolve.
Oh, nice.
Since for some reason they printed Allosaurus Shepherd as all green spells and not just creatures.
Yeah.
So
I'm still not completely sure what the card does, but it's like too new for me.
It's basically
okay.
It's an uncounterable 1-drop that basically makes all your green cards uncounterable, and then also randomly overruns elves.
That does make your green suns like pretty good.
Yeah, and just even with like a Reclaimer and an Allosaurus Shepherd, like the overrun ability is like a legit threat. Like
yeah, and then like the Reclaimer would still get its +2/+2, so it'd be like a 7/7. Yeah.
Yeah, so or 70, whatever the issue is, depending on how many lands you have in your yard. But yeah, as a 1 of and a Green Sun Zenith package, plus the normal stuff with the Arbor to accelerate you. So Zenith on 1, Stage Depths is turn 3, kind of like a weird Urborg way to get there.
I do like that it gets to play like both the Reclaimer and the Reliquary. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think I want to say that, so I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but I did talk to Jarvis a little bit about it. I think the mana was still bad, believe it or not. Like it was still vulnerable.
Jay's right. You need to update the edited through Moonstumpy in July because it's now October.
Well, no, this is where it was. That's where we left off. We didn't finish until 20 minutes ago.
Always 20s with you.
It's a shame it's not a little later in the month. I could write Last Fillet at All Hallows Eve kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Not quite there yet, though.
It's okay. It'll happen soon enough.
Yeah, so I think there was some issues with the mana. One of my biggest concerns with the deck when I first looked at the list is I just don't like lists that punt to combo in early games, and I feel like that was the kind of list that really, really, really needed to take both post-board games and a lot of combo matchups. And I know
is there like a green true believer they could play or something that helps in some sort of way?
No, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look at a list. I don't know whether
maybe running... not true believer. Like
yeah, I don't know whether there was a 1 of Hate Bear in the main to go with the Zenith package or not. I know Newton runs like Newton goes on and off of running Collector
like Teague or something.
Yeah, Teague, I don't think many people run anymore in the main.
Yeah, because it's like bad with the Green Sun and it doesn't stop enough.
Yeah, so I think Oof, if you're gonna run a 1 of Hate Bear in the main with the Zenith, is the card of choice. Yeah, so like Thalia in the main was like, it depended on the version. Sometimes you saw it, sometimes you didn't, and other than that, yeah, you're kind of in a spot that I'm not comfortable with against combo in game 1. And I know there's a plethora of great sideboard options in those colors to try and level it off, but you're going to be on the draw in one of those games, and yeah, I don't know.
So what it sounds like to me is that it could be possible that green-white could be better in a specific field or metagame, but do you think if you're just playing against a random selection of like what we outlined here, you would like to be playing one of these black-based variants to have enough interaction in that sort of spot?
Yeah, that's just my own. That's always been my own personal play style preference. Like even when slow black-green was one of the best decks, if not the best deck, there was like a stretch when Grixis Control was a very, very strong deck where Depths just trashed it. And Slow Depths was one of, if not the best deck in the format. I still wouldn't play that deck. I was still on Bug back then.
Classic.
Because I thought Bug was better against the combo decks with the Flusterstorms and Rainstorms and all that stuff.
And one Stifle.
I always lean towards the being better versus combo, which it's just a personal preference. I don't think that's better or worse, but yeah, I think in an overwhelmingly fair style meta, green white could be very, very good. Yeah, I mean, and if that's where you end up, where you're splashing a third color for Plague Engineers and Bayous, that could be where some of the comments about the mana being an issue could come from. So
any final words, chat? You got anything else? I feel like we're at a pretty natural stopping point, but we'll just go as long as there's still stuff to go on.
So just to give them a second and to fill the air. So I hear you're on vacation all week.
Yep.
You got anything planned for your week off, or are you just gonna reset?
I literally played a video game all day today, and then tomorrow I'm going to hang out with one of my old coworkers, and who like lives in the same building as me. So we're going to socially distance, like eat lunch together, and we're gonna play like goats format of Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Like people call it like the Call Blade of Yu-Gi-Oh, and it has like it's like a specific era where the rules worked a certain way that like made the game pretty interesting. Um, and he just told me he liked playing Yu-Gi-Oh a lot, and he actually played around during that era. And I just told him I had like 2 copies of this mirror that was very skill intensive, and he was like very down for doing it. So finally get to do that tomorrow. And then Wednesday onward, I'm not sure. I do want to reset my sleep schedule, and I'm kind of working on it every day. I have things in boxes, and even though I've lived in my apartment for a year and a half almost, but I'm probably going to start unpacking a little bit more, and like setting things up. I also need to just like dust and clean up. I'm like very bad at that. Since no one has really come over to my apartment since COVID started, like quarantine, I haven't really like cleaned as much because I just like I don't care that much, but I know it's good to like keep things cleaner. I also might I don't know. There's like a really good trail that one of my coworkers recommended by my apartment that I might go check out. I'm really excited for this Sunday. I'm gonna be once again safely seeing my parents. They're going to be coming over. I actually haven't seen them since New Year's, and typically I see my family maybe 6 to 8 times a year. So it's like it feels really weird to have not seen them for so long, but you know, just trying to make an effort. And I don't know. So it is kind of weird. So since I've been working, so I graduated college in 2014, I've been working fairly continuously. Like I've had some gaps of time between jobs, but other than those gaps of times and forming 4-day weekends with like, you know, if New Year's and Christmas is like on a Tuesday, I'll take that Monday off just to connect them. And I take every Black Friday off because like that makes a very easy 4-day weekend. But more often than not, like literally every vacation day besides forming 4-day weekends, I would take only for Magic tournaments. I would take a whole week off for like every Pro Tour and stuff like that. So this is the first year where I like, you know, I'm no longer a pro. I'm not qualified for anything. And I've been on the train for a while or grinding GPs such that just like 40 of my 52 weekends would be dedicated to Magic. Then 8 of the other ones would typically be for visiting my family for various people's birthdays and holidays and stuff like that. So this might be the first working week of my life that I've taken off not for Magic. So I sincerely just don't know like what to do with all this time, and each day I'm just trying to make sure that I'm doing whatever makes me the happiest, which is why, you know, I reached out to you about this because I knew it was something I wanted to do, and this was like a really good time to do it. That's why I played video games all day today, where like normally I would feel a little bit bad that I wasted a whole day playing video games, but it's what I want to do today. But I'm trying to make sure that each day I'm doing at least something different, or else I know if you get caught up like just doing one thing like the whole time. But yeah, I also want to work on like some introspection and self-improvement before I go back to work. Like I've been listening to this podcast called The Happiness Lab, where they go over just like ways that you can, like, they kind of have done a lot of research into like psychology and how humans work in terms of like how to, ways we can improve our either mindset point of view, how we go about goals and stuff to make ourselves happier. And I've been listening to that and taking notes on it and consuming it whenever I want to. But it's actually funny. Like, I'd probably say 75% of the stuff they recommend, I already do. Like, it's just like innate to me. But when a lot of people hear it, like, it seems to help them out a lot. So to anyone listening, I do highly recommend that podcast. And I think it's been very useful, and it's free and everything, like most podcasts are. But I've really liked that. That's about it.
Nice.
So just doing whatever.
So has the Happiness Lab podcast ever covered how happy it would make you to be playing versus a dark depth strategy and to summon Caracas to the top of your deck?
No,
because that kind of thing makes Goblin Lackey very, very happy.
Did that happen against you or something?
Look, I just made him happy, so now I'm going to make him sad. So of the 15 times we've played, you have to let them steal a match every now and then with a Caracas off the top.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, think of how sad you are that you've never beaten me in a sanctioned match of Magic. I don't want Goblin Lackey to feel that way. So it's perfect that he got the win there. So one of my coworkers who's like pretty awesome and plays Magic and stuff, you actually played against him in Anurag's tournament. He was playing Hogak. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. I've consoled him. No, so we actually play tennis every week, and I played tennis a lot in high school. He played in high school also. We're both like not particularly good though, and I've literally lost to him every single week. I think we've been playing for like over 3 months now, and we always play we started playing one set, now we're playing 2 sets, and I've not won a single set, even though like we're probably closer than it lets on. I just like always, I'm just not great, but like still trying to improve. And at some point we're like switching sides, like during the most recent time we played a match, and I just smile and I'm just like, man, you are so lucky. I take losing so well. Because like how many people would like just keep on coming at you, like I'm watching videos like every week. I'm like actively trying to get better that way I could like beat them. And yeah, it like takes a certain type of person to keep on smashing their head against the wall.
Yeah, it's basically exactly what you said. It's the desire to get better, right? Like I know, when I was a lot younger, I was really into hockey, and I used to play against people that were much older than me, and I was the worst player for a significant period of time because I was like 10 and I'm playing against 14 and 15 year olds. Mm-hmm. And eventually I just wasn't, and then I was basically one of the better players against anyone I would play against, because eventually you just get into competition in your correct bracket and you've suddenly got a lot better. But it took a lot of misery to get good, and Magic's the same way. Like if you want to improve in a matchup or in a format or with a deck, if you find someone that's great with that deck or just much better than you in a specific format, and they're willing to just sit there and pound on you, those are the best lessons you can possibly get, because you're going to figure a lot out. They're going to, even if they're not a great teacher, you're going to pick up all your observationally, you're going to pick up on a lot of what they're doing and just improve. And I think that's one of the best ways you can. And as far as like banging the head against the wall, that's not a Goblin Lackey thing. He's obviously very skilled. He's just that matchup in particular is fairly lopsided in Depp's favor. So.
Oh yeah, I know his prowess. I had to commentate a whole tournament with him in it.
Which one was that?
It was the Legacy Double Dash.
Oh, that's right. I forget that thing existed.
Mm-hmm.
I
already mentioned it previously on the stream.
Yeah, but I just like kind of glossed by it and didn't respond. I think I just let that go. Speaking of events, now that it's on my mind fresh, thanks, where I had that game
Oh, look, see, he's right there.
Yeah. You know how I got
always watching.
You know how I got knocked out of that event? With a Caracas off the top when they were dead on board.
Who would have thought?
Look at this. The whole league is suddenly in the chat talking about.
So I do want to address faulted forms thing, and it's more of a Magic philosophical question that I feel like I can answer, whereas you could probably answer it in this specific situation. One-ofs in the sideboard, like one-ofs in general in Magic, when you can't tutor for it, like, so when they're proactive, it allows you, when it's in your hand or the ability to draw it, to be put into situations where you can produce this advantage, or you can do things that your opponent doesn't have enough equity against, in terms of like being able, like, you gain a lot of bluff equity in certain situations with certain types of proactive threats, because the times that you have it, like, you punish them in other spots. So a good example would be, I don't know, attacking a 2/2 into their 2/2. Like, they might not be allowed to block because you go follow up with a planeswalker that can't protect itself or something like that. Just as like a quick random example. So by playing one of that planeswalker and then being aware maybe that you're only playing one of that planeswalker, it's like high enough impact, but you get to choose if this 2/2 gets to trade off or not. So then like you can attack with your 2/2. Then they're like, okay, they could have this one of, so now I can't block, and now you dealt 2 extra damage because you play one of in your deck. Similarly, when cards in your hand, say like very back in the day in the white weenie mirror, you would play like Wrath of God in your sideboard, so you can make certain like equity attacks that, like, I'm gonna attack first because they might not block, because they might be respecting the fact that I could have Wrath of God even if it's just a one of. Whereas like they might make bad trades, then you could like have some sort of follow up. And then when you have reactive cards, say like a Singleton Veil of Summer, or Flusterstorm, like, it allows you to play the game very differently when it's in your hand, or gives you like your ability to have brainstorms like play in a different way. So one-ofs are a lot about slanting the game and being of high enough impact. And sometimes one-ofs are also there because there could be huge diminishing returns to play more, of which Sylvan Library definitely falls into that camp.
Yeah, I think specifically to Depths, it's all about what matchups you want to attack. So when you look at the mapping across, Sylvan Library is a high impact card in a lot of matchups, especially the Swords to Plowshares matchups. So you're kind of looking at it not as like I have to be able to find this card, or I have to be able to hit this on this curve or whatever. You're looking at it as, these are the 60 I want to fight with post board, and in conjunction with everything else that's already going on in the deck, the games that have this are going to be much, much better. But to your point, you can definitely cut it from more of like a targeted Sledgehammer card, because you can get by in the white matchups without Sylvan Library. Like, you're not going to see it in a huge percentage of games as a one-of. So like in the newer version of the shell, I'm running a couple of copies of Mindbreak Trap, and one of the slots that it ate was the Sylvan Library slot. Because Mindbreak Trap is just a complete beating against a few decks that I felt needed to be targeted at the moment. But I think in general, in an open field, having the extra library against not only the plow decks, but in like against the mirror, like against depth shells and lands and any deck that doesn't pressure you.
Miracles.
It's just miracles. Any deck that doesn't pressure you, the card is just so good. And it just improves your post board 60. That, you know, in the games you don't find it, that means you're finding other good cards in the matchup. It's just part of the overall shell and the overall plan. And it fits in enough slots and improves enough matchups when you do see it that I think it carries its weight. But there are definitely metas and times where it is better to run an extra bomb, whether you feel that's a trap or, since you mentioned it, a second collector oof. So like if you think there's Mystic Forge decks floating around, or like, you know, extra Bomberman shell, or, you know, too much Karn Echo floating around.
Test.
Yeah, too many of those style decks.
You can even play 4 oofs.
Yeah, I think trap is actually better than oof against TES, to be perfectly honest. But I think it's close. But either way, yes, if you decide that you want to run more of a targeted specific card like that, like obviously you'll improve in 3 or 4 matchups, but your deck's going to be a slightly lower quality in like 8 or 9 other matchups. So whether you think that cost is worth it or not depends on what you're running into. So, or what you expect the meta to be, I guess is a better way to say it. All good decks run 4 Sylvan libraries. I think he's challenging you again. I think Matt's just has an issue with you. I don't know how else to say it.
Wouldn't be the first and won't be the last.
Or maybe it's just 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and Matt needs to get some sleep. I'm not sure which it is, but
I think we should also oblige to even East Coast people like us. So I think it's a good spot to call it.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks again for doing this. If you get bored during your week off and want to run through a league or something, we could do that. Otherwise, we can do our traditional Christmas Eve stream.
Is that when we started this?
Yeah. Well, not this. No, we did. We did Christmas Eve. We ran a league of.
It was the first time that we ever did this.
Yeah, I forget whether it was Bug Depths or Turbo Depths. We ran a league of depths
Turbo,
where people were annoyed because we were just talking the entire time while I was
instead of talking about
I was playing in the background, and then like every half hour or so you'd be like, oh, that was interesting, and then we would go back to storytelling.
Yeah.
So we went through a league, and then
we played the blue-white cube,
and then we
where we played like
yeah.
Fractured Identity, some messed up card.
Yeah, and I had to learn how Sensei's Divining Top worked online.
And Resto Angel.
And Restoration Angel, yeah. So yeah, we drafted and played a Legacy League. And
yeah.
So
if I'm not doing anything Christmas Eve, I'd be down.
There it is. So well, at some point we'll do something, whether that's soon or out in the distance. It'll work.
Yeah, with like how my work is scheduled, I probably not this week, but I'm busy until Thanksgiving week, so it would have to be the week after that or later. So probably December is actually probably a good time for me.
We'll pencil in the 24th.
Yep.
That was fun.
All right, sounds good.
All right, man. Thanks for doing it again. Take it easy and enjoy your break.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Good night.